Chapter 534. Arbor was standing at the edge of the pond, looking at the clear water and endlessly taking pictures. Her small face was full of confusion. She heard some messy footsteps. Turning her head, she saw several servant girls rushing over from the stone path. "Hurry, hurry! Family Head has ordered for everyone to gather at the main entrance. His Highness the Crown Prince's carriage is already at the entrance." Ah! The servant girls' voices rose and fell in unison. They had long heard that their His Highness the Crown Prince was a peerlessly handsome man who didn't lose to eldest young master or second young master. They were so excited. His Highness the Crown Prince rarely showed his face. Was he going to come to the Chin estate today? Ah! Hurry and help me take a look. See if my makeup is smudged. Heavens, if I had known earlier, I would have worn that begonia hairpin today. The little fellow threw the women's chattering to the back of her mind. Arbor didn't have time to think carefully and abruptly ran towards the kitchen. That fool, why did he really come? Someone else wants to deal with you, idiot. You're a high and mighty crown prince. Why are you blindly joining in the fun? Don't you know that there is no good banquet, no good meeting? The little fellow ran to the kitchen's back door in one breath. With a light leap, she was already on the kitchen's roof beam. Squatting there, she propped up her chin and carefully observed for a while. The kitchen was in full swing at this moment. All kinds of ingredients were being pushed in on small carts like flowing water. They were being washed, cut, boiled, and stir-fried. It was very lively. The head steward who controlled the entire kitchen was currently yelling back and forth, "Hurry, hurry! Why are your hands and feet so slow? I told you to hurry up and wash. It's about to be cooked. The guests are all in their places. The banquet is about to start. Everyone, hurry up. Ah! Hurry, hurry, hurry!" Arbor squatted on the beam and impatiently pursed her lips. On second thought, if this banquet was messed up and the atmosphere was foul, wouldn't a certain person run back to the palace in a fit of anger? Our dear Chow Mu blinked, and her gaze fell on the dishes that were lined up and ready to be served. A talisman suddenly floated out of his fingertips. The little guy silently opened the talisman, and his figure suddenly disappeared from the beam. Not long after, a bowl with a lid slowly floated up into the air. It floated in the air, and some of the seasonings nearby also flew over. Soon, a bunch of oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar were sprinkled in. Middle grade invisibility talisman. Invisibility lasts for 15 minutes. It is ineffective in front of people with a higher cultivation base. After she had opened the fourth jade slip, she had learned a few new middle-level talismans. The Vitra talisman was one of them, and the invisibility talisman was the second. After adding a lot of ingredients to each plate, Arbor felt satisfied. After squatting for a while, Arbor found nothing unusual. He couldn't help but feel somewhat puzzled. Could it be that family head Chin didn't plan to poison the food and instead planned to assassinate him? However, the poison was indeed a little low-end. The Crown Prince had a specialized apothecary by his side, and everything he ate would be tested first. As Chow Mu thought this, she floated out of the kitchen and headed towards the Chin estate's central courtyard. She wondered what their expressions would be when they ate the spiced dishes later. If Duanyu, that germaphobe, ate a mouthful of mud, his expression would definitely be exceptionally spectacular. At this time, the Chin estate's patriarch was bowing to welcome Prince Mo at the wide-open main entrance with his family members. The guests who had heard the news also came forward to greet him. Mo Lien alighted from the carriage and coldly stared at family head Chin, who was at the front of the procession. Chapter 535. Cold sweat trickled down Chin Guelu's forehead. When the Crown Prince didn't speak, even he was intimidated. He felt as if his heart was tightly clenched by an invisible hand. Family head Chin is the birthday boy today, so there's no need to be overly courteous. After a while, Mo Lien finally spoke in a low voice and waved his hand to dismiss everyone's formality. Chin Guelu felt as if he had been pardoned, and he hastily stood up with a smile on his face. We are honored by the Crown Prince's presence. Your presence brings light to our humble dwelling. Please forgive us for any neglect. Family head Chin, there's no need for pleasantries. We came today to... The Crown Prince has come. A dry voice suddenly interrupted Mo Lien's words. A man in his 30s wearing a bright yellow deerskin cloak was escorted in like a moon surrounded by stars. Mo Lien coldly swept a glance at him. Eldest royal brother. Eldest brother isn't deliberately stealing your limelight. It was royal father who specially instructed me to come here to celebrate the Chin estate's elderly head's birthday. I didn't expect sixth brother to be in such a good mood. That's right. Many people from various patrician families have come today, so sixth brother should also come out and walk around more. Before the great king's son could finish blabbering, the crown prince had already strode inside. The moment he moved, family head Chin led the two young masters and the entourage to follow in a hubbub. The great king's son, Mo Jiao, was immediately embarrassed, and he clenched his fists tightly in his sleeves. This was the crown prince's attitude toward this group of princes, willful, arrogant, and disregarding them. If he was willing to look at you, he would look. If he wasn't, he wouldn't say a single word. Your Highness, please come this way. Chin Guelu personally led the way and bowed as he led the crown prince to the banquet hall. Halfway there, they heard coquettish voices coming from the garden. Evidently, a group of madams and ladies were admiring the plum blossoms in the rear garden. When the great king's son, Mo Jiao, thought of the purpose of this trip, his eyes swiveled, and he hastily walked up to urge the crown prince. Sixth brother, it's still early to leave the banquet anyway. Why don't we take a walk in the garden first? I've always heard that the Chin estate's plum blossoms bloom the best, so this is the best time to admire the plum blossoms. Chin Guelu immediately laughed and repeatedly expressed his assent. Your Highness, please. There's a rare 1000 snow plum in the manor that has already bloomed. It's worth taking a look. Prince Mo wasn't in the mood to appreciate the plum blossoms. Just as he was about to impatiently refuse, he looked up and saw Duan Yu and Situ Yi walking over together. There was also a young man with ordinary features following closely behind the two of them. He kept wanting to speak, but Duan Yu and Situ Yi were chatting among themselves, so he couldn't get a word in edgewise. Little young Master Duan, young Master Situ. Chin Guelu chuckled as he cupped his hands in greeting. Duan Yu nodded, and his indifferent gaze swept over everyone. He suddenly launched an attack at Omega Katoku. Second young master, a mischievous maidservant by your side used a flower pot to injure the Marquis of Su An's family's fifth young master. Shouldn't we find her and demand an explanation for the Marquis of Su An's fifth young master? Omega Katoku, eldest Chin was instantly speechless. How many people had this lass smashed in the past 2 days? She truly had guts that didn't fear anything in the world. Chin Guelu was appalled when he heard this. What? How is the Marquis of Su An's fifth young master's current situation? What maidservant is actually so audacious? Go and find her. The group of Chin estate servants couldn't help rolling their eyes. Lord, your acting is really not bad. Chapter 536. Didn't you already know who it was? Other than that person who beat Miss Biao and Madam until they were bedridden, who else could be so daring? Omega Katoku curtsied indifferently to Duan Yu. Young Master Duan, I'm very sorry. She is still young and doesn't know any better. Her actions are based on her preferences, so please forgive her. Everyone's eyes widened in astonishment. The other party had already come to demand an explanation, so was it all right for young Master Omega Kotoku to be so protective? What kind of maidservant was raised to be so audacious? Were you sure she was a maidservant and not eldest miss? Duan Yu's eyes shot out flames of fury. Look, what kind of lousy matter was this? Omega Kotoku's attitude of taking responsibility for darling Chiao no matter what happened made people loathe her for no reason. Mo Lien glanced at Duan Yu with a frown. Why was there something wrong with this guy today? Insulting someone's maidservant for no reason. Come to think of it, he wasn't such a senseless person. At this time, a commotion broke out in the garden. A maidservant came to report that Miss Chantian of the Talisman Patrician family and Su Mingzhu, the third miss of the Marquis of Placation's estate, got into a fight in the rear garden, and the servants from both sides couldn't restrain the two misses. Everyone looked at each other, bewildered. Qin Guelu only felt his head throbbing. The birthday banquet hadn't even started yet, so what kind of trouble was this? He recognized this maidservant as Concubine May's personal maidservant. The matter must have developed to the point where even Concubine May couldn't handle it, so she hurriedly came to report. When the great king's son heard this, he was energized and hastily said, "Then quickly, let's quickly go take a look. It wouldn't be good if she injured someone." Mo Lien swept him a mocking glance. "You're only thinking about the miss of the Grand Lucier family. What a good-for-nothing." The group moved to the pavilion in the garden, and along the way, they heard Concubine May's maidservant talk about the ins and outs of the matter. Everything was originally quite good. The madams and misses were all admiring the flowers and snow near the pavilion, and everything was harmonious. That maidservant shuddered at the master's glare and said, it was Miss Mu of the Talisman Patrician family said she was bored and suggested a beast duel. Beast fighting was a boring game that the nobles played in their spare time. Of course, they wouldn't use their own mystical beasts to fight. Normally, they would use some young mystical beasts to fight. Basically, after a single battle, the two young mystical beasts would be riddled with scars and close to death. Arbor floated out of the kitchen. When he passed by the garden, he was attracted by the cries of the baby beasts. When she arrived, the two little beasts were already tearing each other to death. However, it was clear that Miss Mu's beast was slightly better. She won. As a result, Su Mingzhu, the third miss of the Marquis of Stability's estate, flew into a rage out of humiliation. She was so angry that she used her sword to wildly hack at the little beast that had lost the competition. Arbor was furious when he saw this. He ran over and gave Su Mingzhu a big slap to make her stop. And then things went wrong. Xiao Mu was still invisible at this time. Third young Miss Su thought that this slap was from Miss Mu, so she immediately turned around and mercilessly slapped Miss Mu back. The stupefied Miss Mu didn't expect third young Miss Su to be such a sore loser. At once, she couldn't hold back the anger in her heart and pounced over to slap Su Mingzhu as well. The two immediately started fighting. Neither of them were kind people, scaring Concubine May to the point that she collapsed to the ground. She shouted delicately, "Io, stop fighting, stop fighting. Quickly go invite Master. Quickly go." It would have been better if she didn't shout, but once she did, Arbor felt goosebumps all over his body. He immediately thought that this voice was the same as that night when she snuck into the Qin estate and heard through the window. Chapter 537. Concubine May was paralyzed on the ground in fright. All the official madams looked down on her, and none of them were willing to help her. Originally, the madams were already very displeased that the Qin estate sent a concubine to entertain them when they were visiting the estate for the Qin estate's birthday banquet. Now that they saw Concubine May acting like a coquettish concubine who couldn't be shown in public, they felt like they had eaten a fly and looked down on her even more. Madame Moose sat there motionlessly with a smile and didn't stop her daughter. In any case, her daughter wouldn't suffer a loss. That Su Mingzhu simply wasn't her Qianqian's match. Her eyes contained a layer of frost as she coldly gazed at the third miss of the Marquis of Placation's estate. A mere miss of a declining Marquis's estate dared to attack her daughter. She deserved to be taught a lesson. When the servants shouted, "His Highness the Crown Prince has arrived," our dear Qiao Mu, who was watching with relish, jumped in fright. She immediately turned around and fled in a panic. She felt like there was a row of piercing gazes on her back that burned her. "Fuck, I've already turned invisible, so why can't I escape your discerning eyes?" Our dear Qiao Mu ran very quickly, but how could she compare to the Crown Prince's terrifying speed? Just as he leaped over, his hand was already about to grab her wrist. Our dear Qiao Mu hurriedly threw several speed talismans on herself and fled like a wisp of smoke. The Crown Prince didn't chase after her and stopped, his gaze lingering as he gazed in the direction she ran off in. "Ha! You know how to feel guilty now. You even dared to avoid me. You really are a naive darling. You think you can run away after showing yourself? Your Highness." When Mu Qianqian saw the Crown Prince dashing in her direction, her maiden heart nearly leaped out of her chest. "I am fine. Your Highness doesn't need to worry." Mu Qianqian blushed as she gave a coquettish laugh. She thought that the Crown Prince was dashing over because he saw that she was being bullied. She thought that His Highness the Crown Prince was worried about her. In reality, there was no one else in Mo Lian's eyes except for that fleeing darling who had turned invisible. It was only when he heard Mu Qianqian speak that he realized she was standing next to him and looking at him bashfully. He was instantly annoyed. Recently, his mother had been busy identifying noble ladies for him, and apparently, she quite liked this talisman patrician family's eldest miss. Mo Lian had something on her mind, so she walked to Duan Yu's side. She gave him a look, and the two of them walked to the side. Qin Guelu only felt vexed, and he reprimanded Concubine May before placating the two patrician family's young misses. He only felt that so many things had happened before the banquet had even started, and he was flustered. Like a proud peacock, Mu Qianqian glanced at the disheveled Su Mingzhu before returning to her mother's side. Her large eyes stared expectantly at the Crown Prince's back. Madame Mu patted the back of Mu Qianqian's hand, hinting for her not to be impatient. The position of His Highness's official wife, the Mu family is determined to get it. On the other end, Qiao Mu ran all the way back to the pool and looked at her reflection in the water. Yes, the invisibility talisman was useless in front of people with higher cultivation than him. No wonder a row of piercing gazes fell on her. There was nowhere to hide. Fortunately, she had escaped quickly. Otherwise, wouldn't she have been caught? Why was she feeling guilty? Why did she have to run away? At worst, she would just be caught. Once she thought of being caught, a certain person started feeling guilty again. Qiao Mu looked at her reflection in the pool for a while. No matter how she looked at it, her face was completely different from before. There wasn't the slightest flaw on her body, so how in the world did someone recognize her? She touched her flawless, small face. Chapter 538. After the banquet started, the atmosphere was still peculiar. The Crown Prince was silent, so no one dared to casually speak loudly. Qin Guelu coughed in mock embarrassment and respectfully reminded, "Your Highness." The Crown Prince looked up and nodded at the 2 rows of guests below. Today is family head Qin's birthday, so there's no need to be reserved. Let's eat. It was only then that everyone picked up their chopsticks with relaxed expressions and casually tasted the food. Afterwards, Ah, poo, poo. Poo. Pft. Cough, cough. All sorts of strange spitting sounds came from the mouths of these aristocratic family disciples. Everyone speechlessly looked at the dumbfounded Chinguelu and saw that his face had turned green after tasting a mouthful of food. They didn't know whether to spit or not. This mouthful was so splendid. It felt like a seasoning bottle had been knocked over, and there were all sorts of exotic flavors. Oh, and he even ate a mouthful of dirt. Pfft, Duan Yu face-bombed, his shoulders shaking from laughter. Good heavens, everyone ate a mouthful of dirt. This truly was so joyful. Thankfully, he had picked up his chopsticks late. Look at the Crown Prince's eccentric expression, ha 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 ha. Serves you right. You're out of luck. It's all your fault for spoiling you, so you deserve to eat dirt. Thinking back to the invisible figure he saw in the garden just now, it was easy to figure out who had done this good deed. Chinguelu immediately turned pale with fright and knelt before the Crown Prince. He didn't even dare to raise his head or look at the Crown Prince's eccentric expression. Your Highness, please forgive me. It was this one's incompetence in controlling the servants that caused the situation in the main kitchen. Rest assured, Your Highness, this one will definitely find the mastermind as soon as possible and punish them severely. Mo Lien gracefully accepted the plate handed over by the junior eunuch beside her and silently spat out the foreign substance in her mouth. She waved her hand at Chinguelu and said, Rise, it has nothing to do with you. Chinguelu immediately felt as if he had been pardoned, and he stood up while wiping the sweat from his forehead, thanking her profusely. Where's old fifth of the Marquis of Su An's estate? The Crown Prince suddenly asked. His gaze met Duan Yu's for a moment before looking away. The Marquis of Su An's estate's fifth young master, whose head was wrapped in bandages and who looked extremely miserable, was immediately dragged over. The fifth young master's face was full of confusion. He did not understand what was going on. He was about to return home, but he was forcibly invited down from the carriage. This meant that the Crown Prince wanted to see him. Although he said it was an invitation, his attitude was very rude and unyielding. This was the Crown Prince's style of dealing with people. Young Master Omega Kotoku's brows slightly creased. Just now, it was he who had quickly arranged for people to take care of this Marquis of Su An's residence's fifth young master, ordering people to send him back to his residence. But now, he had actually returned. Omega Kotoku sensed that something was amiss. Since the beginning, the young master of the Duan family had been targeting Xiaobao, and now even the Crown Prince, second young master raised his head and looked at the Crown Prince coldly. The latter looked back coldly. Marquis of Su An's estate's old fifth, how is your body? I heard that you were hit on the head by an audacious maidservant. The Crown Prince didn't even know what this fellow's name was and could only call him Marquis of Su An's estate's old fifth. Hui Feng stood on the side, and his mouth silently twitched. The Marquis of Su An's estate's old fifth, the powder-faced young man who Yukong, was immediately overwhelmed by the favor and bowed. Thank you for your Highness the Crown Prince's concern. This humble subject's body is fine, and I was just about to return to my residence to rest. Marquis of Su An's estate's old fifth. The Crown Prince stared deeply at the unlucky fellow wrapped in bandages below. Don't worry. With us here, us will definitely uphold justice for you. How about I find that maidservant for you to confront her face to face? Chapter 539. The pink-faced youth was overwhelmed by the favor and knelt down repeatedly, nodding in thanks. Yes, yes. Many thanks for your Highness's favor. The Crown Prince nodded in satisfaction and turned to look at Qin Guelu. Family head Qin, go call that maidservant over. Look at how badly she beat up the Marquis of Su An's son. How can this matter be resolved peacefully? Chin Guelu's forehead was drenched in cold sweat as he furtively glanced in the direction of his two sons. Omega Kotoku beckoned to a servant and instructed in a low voice, "Go invite the miss over and tell her not to be afraid. I will deal with everything." Chin Guelu sighed in relief. He was worried that this child Omega Kotoku's temper would flare up and contradict the crown prince to his face, causing the matter to spiral out of control. Seeing that Chin Guelu sent someone to invite her over, his expression relaxed slightly, and he cupped his hands. "I've already arranged for the main kitchen to prepare a new meal. Everyone, please wait for a moment. Enjoy a song and dance first." The appearance of Junhue Pavilion's Miss Ran immediately drew cheers from the various patrician families, marquises and grandsons. Very soon, the earth-eating episode was over. Everyone was watching Miss Rant's rare moon dance in high spirits. The crown prince wasn't in a hurry either. He swirled the wine cup in his hand and swept his gaze over the guests below from time to time, a frightening smile curling his lips. "Jojo, are you ready?" Arbor shook her head like a rattledrum. "Not going." The Chin estate servant in charge of inviting people twitched his mouth as he repeatedly cupped his hands and bowed. "Little great aunt. Please come with me. Young master and the others are all waiting for you." "Don't worry, young master said that he will take care of everything. He will definitely guarantee that you will be fine." Arbor hugged a tree and dodged to the side. Not going. The servant coughed and had a bright idea. "You were in high spirits when you beat up the Marquis of Su, Anne's fifth master. Are you scared now?" "I'm scared." Arbor's eyes flared with anger. She then lowered her small head dejectedly. Fine. She was scared. She felt guilty when she saw the crown prince. 2 years ago, she promised him that she would go to the capital to find him, but in the end. "Let's go, little grand aunt. There really isn't enough time." The servant begged bitterly, coaxing and inviting Xiao Mu to the banquet's antechamber, forcing a duck onto a perch. The male and female guests were separated at the birthday banquet. However, on the way to Arbor, they had to pass by the female guest seats and head toward the front hall. Along the way, they received puzzled looks from the ladies. What should come will come. Darling Xiao's emotions calmed down. What was she afraid of? Wasn't he just going back on his word and getting fat? Wasn't it just 2 years of hiding and not wanting to see anyone? Humph. What could he do to her? But what should I do if I'm so scared? Her small hands were inexplicably covered in cold sweat. Sob. Is it really okay to be so cowardly? When the servant went in to report, Lady Rant's dance had just finished, and the entire hall was silent. The crown prince smirked and said coldly, "Bring her in." Everyone turned their heads to look and saw a little girl with a stiff expression walking in from the front hall. From the moment the child entered, the crown prince's gaze was firmly locked on her. He stared at her intently, as if he was crazy. The fire in his heart couldn't be suppressed and shot straight up. The little girl's hands were tucked in her small sleeves as she stepped on the limestone floor tiles and walked forward. Her expressionless face looked straight ahead, as if she didn't care about anyone at all. It made people laugh involuntarily. "Little junior sister, it's really you." Situi was the first to jump up and stared at her in disbelief. He still thought that he was dreaming. "Who are you?" Arbor turned around expressionlessly. When this low voice came out of her mouth, Situi was really stunned. Because Xiao Mu's voice had also been processed with medicine, the moment she spoke, her voice was a bit lower than her usual crisp and soft voice, and it was very deep and insidious. Seeing him stunned, Arbor couldn't help but feel secretly happy. See, I knew it was a bluff. She didn't recognize me at all. Her flawless disguise technique, how could there be a mistake? There's a lot of content here, so don't be anxious. Chapter 540. Situee was dumbstruck as he stood there without moving. He couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he racked his brains. Why was this voice different from his little stoic junior sister's? But looking at this face, there was no doubt that this was his expressionless junior sister, right? There wouldn't be a second Sundra little stoic like her in this world. The crown prince's gaze didn't move from the little fellow's body, and the corners of his mouth curled faintly. Darling, you want to ascend to the heavens, right? You disguised your appearance and even changed your voice. Ha, so impressive. Did you think no one would recognize you by doing this? That movement, that expression, that frosty gaze, that yearning that was imprinted in the depths of his bone marrow and soaked into his blood, that even if you wrapped yourself in a black robe and shrunk your head and tail, we can still recognize you with a glance. We absolutely won't forget. Our dear Chow Mu sneaked a peek at the crown prince's expression and discovered that Guy was propping up his chin with one hand. Light flickered in his slightly upturned phoenix eyes as he stared unblinkingly at her. The little stoic reflexively extended two fingers and stealthily gestured in the direction of his line of sight. She discovered that his line of sight was in a straight line, and he was staring at her. The little fellow guiltily tugged at the strands of hair that floated in front of her eyes. She couldn't figure it out. My disguise and voice are such perfect moves. What exactly is the situation? I really want to ask them, where in the world did you recognize me? Next time, she definitely had to pay attention to this aspect. This way, her disguise would be flawless. Cough. Chin Guelu couldn't help but chuckle dryly when he saw that no one was speaking at all. He berated Chow Mu, come over here. What's your name? Why did you hit the Marquis of Su An's estate's fifth young master? Eldest Chin covered his face with his hand. He simply couldn't bear to continue watching his pretentious father. What didn't family head Chin know about every single thing that happened in the estate? He was asking the obvious. Why? Speak. Family head Chin glared angrily at a certain someone who didn't utter a word and even slapped the short table heavily. The Marquis of Su An's estate's fifth young master, Hu Yukong, whose head was wrapped in bandages and who had an extremely miserable expression, also got up from the ground and glared at Arbor with bloodshot eyes, demanding an explanation. Arbor was baffled. He thought to himself, what's going on? Didn't they call her over because the crown prince wanted to confront her face to face and expose her identity? How would she know about the fifth young master of the Marquis' estate? Ever since she bumped into Duan Yu and was recognized by him at a glance, the little stoic had been conflicted between, oh no, I was recognized, and, what's going on? How did they recognize me? In the midst of all these questions, he had long forgotten about the episode where he smashed the fifth young master in the Red Cedar Promenade. Now that he mentioned something about the Marquis of Su An's estate's fifth young master, to tell the truth, she really didn't remember. Moreover, she did make a move, but she did not see the fifth young master's face clearly at all. Therefore, even though fifth young master was glaring at her like a tiger eyeing its prey, she still put on an innocent face with a blank expression. Mo Lien looked at her small face and knew that she had long forgotten about beating up the Marquis of Su An's residence's fifth young master. Duan Yu's mouth twitched as he kindly reminded, it's that person who smashed the back of someone's head with a super large flower pot in that long corridor. Yes. You're the one who smashed the back of my head. Don't think of denying it. Hu Yukong bellowed with a flushed face. Low chuckles rang out at the banquet. Duan Yu turned his head away, unable to bear to watch. Chapter 541. When he told her about the flower pot in the long corridor, Arbor immediately remembered. So it's you, this coward. What else can you do besides tattletale? The little stoic's eyes abruptly flared up in anger, and she kicked Hu Yukong in the stomach, sending him tumbling out and crashing into Situ Yi's low table with a crash. Situ Yi hastily jumped up to dodge, only to see that unlucky guy pressing down on that table and tumbling to the ground with the table. Hu Yokong's entire body was pressed down by the overturned table, and his legs trembled outside the table. Family head Qin's mouth gaped open. Although he had heard the servants report the formidable aspects of the second young master's valiant maidservant, hearing was one thing, seeing it with his own eyes was another. You! Situ Yi pointed at our dear Chiao Mu and said with certainty, "You are little junior sister. Don't deny it. You. Come here right now. Quickly come here." Arbor glanced at him and pattered to him. Situ Yi pulled her to his side and raised his hand to rub her head. He was both speechless and earnest as he said, "Little junior sister, why are you so disobedient? Where did you run off to these past 2 years? Do you know that everyone was looking for you? How could you disappear just like that and suddenly play the act of completely disappearing? You really made everyone worried sick. Immobilize." Arbor suddenly took out a talisman and slapped it on Situ Yi's forehead. That yellow talisman paper floated on the forehead of the handsome youth with dashing eyebrows and bright eyes. Everyone, Duan Yu was especially speechless as the corner of his mouth kept twitching. This child really didn't change at all. As long as she found it noisy, she would immediately use a strange method to make you quickly shut up. Situ Yi's brows twitched, and he reached out to remove the talisman floating on his face. He looked helplessly at the stoic face. "Little junior sister. Senior brother is saying this for your own good. Don't be impatient and don't be silent. Only by talking can we know what happened in the past 2 years. Senior brother Situ, your cultivation base has risen again." Arbor sighed and looked regretfully at Situ Yi. Her cultivation had also soared once, but she still couldn't stop him. Prince Mo watched darling Chiao from afar. Although he didn't say anything, his grip on the wine glass tightened subconsciously. When the little fellow's relationship with Situ Yi was already this good. By calling him senior brother Situ, he was admitting his identity. When facing him, the little thing, who had been expressionless and trying its best to distance itself from him, had actually so readily acknowledged Situ Yi. The anger in Prince Mo's heart was surging, with nowhere to go. Duan Yu's expression was also unsightly as he stared at Situ Yi from head to toe. He didn't think this guy was better looking than him. The little stoic didn't even acknowledge him, so why did she acknowledge Situ Yi first? Why did he feel such a strong killing intent? Situ Yi was confused. "Come here." Prince Mo spoke. Situ Yi glanced in Prince Mo's direction and saw the Crown Prince's eyes brimming with a terrifying fury. His gaze was chillingly fixed on the hand that was stroking little junior sister's head. Situ Yi sheepishly withdrew his hand and elbowed the little stoic. "His Highness the Crown Prince is calling you over." "Your Highness." Young Sir Omega Katoku suddenly stood up and quickly walked to Arbor. He bowed at Prince Mo. "This one was lax in disciplining my maidservant. I am willing to bear all responsibility." Chapter 542. Monstrous fury surfaced in Prince Mo's eyes. Bang! The wine cup in his hand turned into fine powder and flew away with the wind. Bear responsibility. Where did this scoundrel come from? Pretending to be a protector, he actually wanted to bear all the responsibility for his baby? Then what about him? What did he, Mo Lien, count as? The Crown Prince was enraged. Qin Guilu's eyebrows twitched, and he suppressed some anxiety in his heart. That person said that as long as the Crown Prince arrived, he could immediately take action. Why was there no sign of him taking action yet? Judging from the Crown Prince's towering rage, he probably wouldn't be able to stay in the Qin estate for long. Come, hurry and change His Highness the Crown Prince's wine cup. Young Master Omega Kotoku calmly instructed, his cold gaze sweeping over his subordinates. Sensing that the atmosphere was completely off, his subordinates scrambled to get wine cups. No need for such trouble. Prince Mo abruptly stood up and walked down the steps, approaching Arbor. What to do? He seemed to be very, very angry. Our dear Qiao Mu was inexplicably flustered and vexed. She looked at her two little fingers in a daze, and her small head unconsciously drooped down. She had grown fat from eating her words in these 2 years. He had reason to be angry. She said that she would return to the capital to see him. At that time, he had smilingly agreed and said that he would wait for her. Moreover, the ferrule he had given her had broken, and Big Treasure was dead. She couldn't even keep a single one of the gifts she had given him. She was truly too useless. She was a little jinx who would bring misfortune to anyone who approached her. She wasn't very suitable to be by his side. Come back with me. Seeing her silent and small figure huddled behind Omega Kotoku, the Crown Prince's heart twitched for no reason, and it tightened painfully. He reached out to grab her wrist. In the next instant, his hand was blocked by young Master Omega Kotoku. Your Highness, young Master Omega Kotoku emphasized, this is this humble one's maidservant. Your Highness, please conduct yourself with dignity. Who are you? How dare you speak without thinking in front of us? When did she become yours? She never was. A murderous intent flashed through Prince Mo's eyes. He immediately stretched out his hand and slapped the Omega Kotoku's head without thinking. Your Highness, please calm down. Please forgive my unfilial son for his rudeness, Your Highness. Qin Guelu shouted as his body trembled. When Mo Lian's palm smacked down, he sensed that it was somewhat obstructed by a rather powerful cyclone. This guy's defensive barrier was quite strong. Mo Lian's phoenix eyes contained a bit of killing intent as she coldly swept her gaze over Qin Xian's face. When their gazes met, monstrous waves surged in the depths of their eyes. Prince Mo immediately raised his guard and coldly glanced at the Omega Kotoku. When I first met darling Qiao, you were still nowhere to be found. Get out of my way. Mo Lian angrily shoved the Omega Kotoku before scooping up a certain dazed person and bringing her to her side. Let's go. Prince Mo angrily grabbed the little fellow's wrist and turned around to leave, dragging her along. His fingers were like an iron clamp around her wrist, so how could she struggle free? Our dear Qiao Mu blindly followed him to the entrance of the antechamber, where she saw a crowd of madams and young misses standing nearby and looking at each other from afar. Originally, the female guest lounge wasn't far away, so they all came out of the female guest lounge out of curiosity when they heard the commotion and saw this scene with their mouths agape. Mom, who is this bitch? Why is the Crown Prince grabbing her hand? Mu Qianqian's face paled as she glared at Arbor in disbelief. How could this be? The Crown Prince had never liked to interact with women, so why was he grabbing that bitch's hand so tightly and not letting go? Chapter 543. All the female guests were currently peeping at the Crown Prince's entourage and whispering to each other when they suddenly heard a blood-curdling scream. Help! Help! A young man's trembling voice approached from afar. Ow! A terrifying roar deafeningly traveled in from outside the reception pavilion for female guests, scaring all the madams and young misses into retreating to the sides. The reception pavilion's door was smashed to the ground with a boom. A young man in disheveled clothes rolled in and fell at the feet of a madam. He didn't care about anything else and wanted to hug the other madam's leg. Help! 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 That madam was so frightened by this impetuous little bastard that she continuously retreated, her eyes filled with rage from embarrassment. When Arbor heard this person's voice, her two small brows twitched slightly. Although this person was extremely frightened at this moment, she could still recognize from this voice that this person was the man who had secretly eaten with concubine May in the middle of the night. "Ah, young master cousin," some of the maidservants exclaimed. Only then did Arbor understand that this disheveled young man with a flat nose and a round face was Madame Qin Nei Yang's treasured nephew, young Jiajin, who was stained with misdeeds. What was laughable was that he impatiently sought out his uncle's concubine to secretly eat and even kept his aunt in the dark. It was truly so disgusting that it made people want to vomit. Ow! Another half-naked woman with disheveled hair pounced in from the door. However, she couldn't be called a woman anymore. Her skin had already been replaced by pieces of black, rotting flesh. Her four limbs crawled on the ground at an extremely fast speed, and she entered the reception pavilion in the blink of an eye. Black vortexes flickered in her eyes, and her lifeless eyes stared fixedly at her target, young Jiajin. Grinding her sharp teeth, she opened her mouth slightly to reveal the signature product of a zombie, fangs. Oh my god! Why is it a zombie? The hall was filled with chaotic screams, and the ordinary madams and young misses were truly so shocked that they turned pale and screamed continuously. Don't be nervous, everyone, don't be nervous. Calm down and don't run around recklessly. Don't come into contact with this zombie. Qin Guelu was simply about to cry from anger. What the fuck was going on? Why were there so many things happening at his 60th birthday banquet out of the blue? Who could stand up and tell him why there was a zombie in his house? Now that the entire Guanlon city was under martial law day and night, not to mention zombies, even a mosquito wouldn't be allowed into the city. If news of a corpse puppet appearing in the Qin estate were to leak out, it was unknown how many people would be concerned about it. Perhaps the entire Qin estate would be implicated. Could it be that this was the plan that the Lord had in mind? Letting a zombie in to wantonly attack Crown Prince Mo. Would it work? He didn't look reliable at all. Uncle, save me. Uncle, save me. Young Jiajin was only wearing half of his pants, and half of his foot was broken, as if he had been viciously bitten by a zombie. Young Jiajin was about to go crazy. He wailed bitterly, and his clothes were disheveled as he crawled toward Qin Guelu, causing the unmarried maidens to spit several times in embarrassment and cover their eyes with their hands. He's been bitten. A few of the young masters cried out in horror. Quick, isolate him, don't let him come over. Uncle, save me. Uncle, uncle. Aunt, where are you, Aunt? Ah, save me. Save me. Roar. That zombie suddenly attacked and pounced on young Jiajin's back. Chapter 544. An inhumanly large hole opened in the zombie's enormous mouth, revealing two long fangs that abruptly pierced into young Jiajin's neck and kept biting. Young Jiajin let out a series of wretched cries. Qin Guelu's pupils constricted several times, and he blocked his two sons beside him. Don't go over. Don't go over. Humph. You only have yourself to blame. Arbor suddenly spoke coldly and mockingly glanced at young Master Young Jiajin, who was lying on the ground and being bitten by the zombie. If she didn't guess wrongly, this zombie was the young lady from a good family that young Jiajin had abducted from the jewelry store. She was about to get married, but he bullied her and insisted on forcibly taking her for his own use. After this young lady died, she mutated into a zombie and turned around to seek revenge on him. Truly, karma was very unpleasant. Serves him right. He just deserved to die. Be careful, be careful. She's coming over. Everyone, concentrate your mystic energy and attack. Family head Qin roared angrily and was the first to release a burst of mystic energy, which bombarded the ground beneath the zombie's feet. That zombie's movements were abnormally swift, so fast that it slightly surprised everyone present. Little junior sister, how is this zombie so fast? Situ-E felt that his little junior sister truly had talent in dealing with zombies. He asked without hesitation, completely not noticing the Crown Prince's serene gaze. This is a level 4 zombie and already has some intelligence. Look, she can even seek revenge on her enemies. Arbor reflexively answered Situ-Ye's question. Level 4 zombies move faster than normal people. If they bite a level 5 mystic cultivator, they can obtain a portion of their energy and reach the level of a level 3 mystic cultivator at least. What? Everyone turned pale with fright when they heard this. They completely didn't expect that zombies could obtain energy from mystic cultivators. Was this freaking zombie trying to defy the heavens? Don't get bitten by it. Otherwise, the incubation period after infection would not exceed 5 days, and the body would mutate. Even immortals can't save you, Arbor said indifferently, but everyone shuddered. Uncle, 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 save me. Young Jiajin, who had a bloody hole in his neck and was struggling to crawl forward with one hand covering the wound, cried bitterly and reached out a bloody hand. Qin Guelu clenched his fists. Suddenly, a surge of mystic energy exploded from his entire body, instantly shattering young Jiajin, who had crawled to his side, into a pile of minced meat. Family head Qin is so bold. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They were afraid that Qin Guelu would lose his mind and insist on keeping that scourge young Jiajin alive. Everyone concentrated their firepower on the 4th grade zombie. The female corpse puppet moved very quickly. She lay on the ground and jumped up from time to time, causing the madams and young ladies to scream in fright. Fortunately, these useless women were protected by guards. Seeing that there were so many people, the zombies did not pounce on them. This undead hag already had some intelligence. Instead, she fled towards the window. Don't let her escape. Kill her. Qin Guelu's entire body was drenched in cold sweat. He chased after her from the side with several great mystic cultivators. Several streaks of mystic energy crisscrossed and landed on the zombie's back, and the half-hanging corpse immediately fell from the window. Qin Xian raised his sword and chopped off the zombie's head on the spot. It rolled to the feet of a madam, immediately scaring that delicate madam into fainting. Arbor sniffed and suddenly smelled a strange fragrance in the air. His heart abruptly skipped a beat. Hurry and leave, the hall is about to collapse. Chapter 545. Mo Lian's expression changed slightly, and she grabbed the little girl's waist before swiftly dashing out of the hole. The little girl suddenly stuffed a pill into Mo Lian's mouth. Mo Lian was startled for a moment before swallowing it without any hesitation. As soon as they ran out of the antechamber, they heard a loud boom. Sure enough, the entire room collapsed in a matter of seconds, causing dust and rubble to tumble down. Your Highness. Huifeng hastily chased after them. Mo Lian pulled the little girl's hand back several steps before letting go slightly. She raised her sleeve and waved the flying dust in front of her as she coughed softly. The hole in front of them suddenly collapsed, burying everyone in it in an instant. That idiot Mo Jiao also didn't come out. This was really fun. Let's return to the palace first. Mo Lian no longer had the patience to stay in this foul Qin estate, so she reached out to grab the little fellow's soft little hand. Unfortunately, she caught nothing. When she turned around to look, there was no trace of the little fellow. The little fellow must have used that invisibility talisman to escape while he wasn't paying attention. Huifeng glanced around and saw wailing women and young ladies being helped out one after another, each of them looking miserable with their heads covered in dirt and blood. Huifeng turned again and saw the rage that His Highness the Crown Prince was forcefully suppressing in his eyes. He silently lowered his eyes and inwardly grumbled bitterly. Couldn't this little great aunt go along with their lord a little? What the hell was she trying to do? Why did she disappear all of a sudden? Let's see where you can run to. Mo Lien clenched her fists as she turned around and strode away. Hui Feng quickly followed without a word. At this time, he didn't want to casually open his mouth and become cannon fodder for no reason. Arbor had used an invisibility talisman to escape. Firstly, she didn't know what kind of mood to face that terrifying guy right now. Secondly, there was something wrong with that fragrance, so she had to go over and take a closer look. The Crown Prince wouldn't want to beat her again, right? She was already an adult. If that guy dared to hit her again, she wouldn't let him off. There was a pair of small wings flapping in front of him. The black butterfly was fleeing very quickly, flying high and low in the air. Arbor's speed wasn't slow either, but it kept a certain distance from him. The butterfly left the Qin estate and flew out of the bustling streets. It fluttered into a desolate road and flew into a dilapidated courtyard. Well done. Tomorrow morning, he will definitely be poisoned without anyone knowing. Hee hee hee. A wretched laughter sounded in the small courtyard. Really? Are you that confident? A cold female voice suddenly broke the silence in the courtyard. That person suddenly turned his head, his large and small eyes widened in shock as he stared blankly at the little girl who had just stepped into the courtyard. Arbor's cold gaze fell on him. This person was a dwarf and was extremely short. She had never seen him before. He had a triangular head and an extremely ugly appearance. The main thing was that his eyes were big and small, and his eyebrows were one high and one low. His entire face looked extremely unbalanced, and it stung her eyes. Stinky girl, there's a path to heaven but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell but you insist on barging in. Since you've come, then stay here. The dwarf's expression was sinister as he abruptly stretched out his hand. Countless black-winged butterflies flew out of his sleeves and swarmed toward Arbor in unison. You dare to show off your insignificant skills in front of me. Arbor sneered and waved her sleeves, sending out a wave of medicinal powder. The group of black butterflies in the air desperately flapped their wings and fell down together. Chapter 546. You're actually a poison master. The dwarves cried out in alarm and abruptly opened their palms, releasing a black smoke in front of Arbor. You dare to harm people with your level of poison. Arbor coldly shouted and abruptly dodged the poisonous smoke. The dwarf's eyes contained a poisonous glint, and he cackled strangely, "Little miss, you're still too inexperienced. Do you think that you can dodge my poisonous smoke as you please? From the moment I released the poisonous smoke, the sky above this area has already been permeated with poisonous smoke, ha ha ha." Halfway through his words, the dwarf suddenly clutched his chest and widened his eyes in horror. He abruptly rolled on the ground and started to convulse. A layer of frost swiftly covered his face and limbs, and even his eyebrows were frozen. His lips kept trembling, and he couldn't speak due to the terror in his eyes. You're about to die. Arbor icily said as she brandished a shiny dagger. Guess how many bloody holes I'll poke in your body before you identify the mastermind. The dwarf's originally hideous face was now completely distorted. He glared angrily at Arbor, and his teeth chattered as they made gurgling sounds. Are you very curious as to why you were poisoned? Arbor lightly tapped the dwarf's face twice with the dagger in her hand, and her lips curled into an icy arc. You can go to King of Hell's palace and ask for a clear answer. Speak, which stinking ditch is Shantian Prefecture's Luigi hiding in? Ah! The dwarf hesitated for a second before two bloody holes appeared on his body. His entire body convulsed as he looked on helplessly as this she-devil carried him into the rear courtyard as though she was carrying a bag of trash. On a row of walls in the backyard, countless thin cocoons were hanging. They were shivering softly in the wind. It seems that the poison-tailed butterflies you nurtured are already quite effective. What do you say if I feed you to them? Arbor icily spoke without the slightest warmth in her eyes. And no, I'll speak. The dwarf's eyes revealed terror, and his lips trembled as he said, the one who's been in contact with me is Sir Chio-san. I only know that he's currently hiding inside Bailon City's Bailon fortification. It wasn't far from the capital. As for the exact address, I really don't know. Chio-san. Arbor recalled the familiar voice that had been plotting with Chin Guelu that night, and an idea occurred to him. It's Luigi's lackey. Yes. The dwarf said with a trembling voice, Lord Chio-san is very angry. They said that Northern Prince Mo has caused the people of Shantian Prefecture to be unable to survive these past few years. We must retaliate. In that case, Chin Guelu has indeed colluded with your Shantian Prefecture. Arbor's eyes were instantly dyed with traces of frost and snow. Chin Guelu is very, very careful. He and Shantian Manor have never exchanged any letters. If young Miss wants to accuse him of colluding with Shantian Manor to murder His Highness the Crown Prince, I'm afraid it will be very difficult. Chin Guelu murdered the heir apparent of a kingdom for merely a few pill recipes, Arbor said coldly as he pulled the dagger out of the dwarf's body. The Chin estate has already reached its end. Slap! The dagger was flung out and shot at the wall. Immediately, the cocoon on the wall exploded with a bang. A swarm of black poison-tailed butterflies flew out and gathered into a thick mass, neatly wrapping around the dwarf. The dwarf howled in pain among the poison-tailed butterflies. I already said it. I don't think I said it before. If you confess honestly, I'll spare your life. Arbor replied with an indifferent expression. When he turned around, his gaze landed coldly on the black figure that swooped down from the sky. Less than an hour later, Arbor successfully returned to the Chin estate. She secretly snuck into Chin Guelu's study and found nothing, as expected. Chin Guelu, this old fox, had already erased everything that he had done. She returned to her room and lay down with her clothes on. She seemed to vaguely see Omega Kotoku's figure swaying outside. He raised his hand to knock on the door, but seeing that she had already turned off the lights, he seemed to give up. The little fellow was a bit frightened after being tormented for the entire day, and she fell into a deep sleep as soon as her head hit the pillow. Chapter 547. She slept very well that night. Unlike usual, she wasn't woken up by the slightest noise. Arbor opened her eyes and felt refreshed. Her breathing was long. But she blinked and rolled over, wrapped in a thick brocade quilt. She stared dumbfoundedly at the thick, bright yellow muslin that fell from above her head. This large bed made of agarwood that was several feet wide was clearly not the one she had in the Chin estate. She raised her hand to touch it. The bright yellow canopy was woven with gold silk and inlaid with jade beads. Two translucent white jade pendants swayed gently. And this brocade quilt of hers? The little fellow stretched out her small hand from the quilt with a dumbfounded expression. She checked her surroundings and sat upright with the quilt wrapped around her. What was going on? The dazzling candlesticks were set up every 5 steps, and the red candles were brightly lit. Rows of fist-sized luminous pearls hung from the 4 corners. The inner walls of the room were carved with white jade. At a glance, the inside and outside of the room were bright and clear. It was so spacious that it made one dumbfounded. This? How was this a side room? Wasn't this a luxurious palace? What was going on? Why did the Chin estate side room change into an unfamiliar bedroom after waking up? Was there anyone who could tell her what was going on? Arbor hopped off the bed barefoot and ran a few steps. She lifted the heavy bead curtains and looked back. After running all the way, she had only just run out of the vicinity of the bed. Is there anyone here? Arbor threw the brocade quilt on the ground and ran to the treasure pavilion to rummage through her clothes in a short-sleeved inner garment. Xiao Yao led a row of palace maids in. When she came in with neatly arranged clothes, she was stunned to find her little master rummaging through something in front of the treasure pavilion. Our dear Xiao Mu turned her head and saw Xiao Yao. Her eyes lit up, and she coughed awkwardly. I am looking for clothes. Pfft, Xiao Yao couldn't help but laugh out loud. Her little master was rummaging through clothes in the treasure pavilion. Master, you're finally back. Xiao Yao was already a big girl. She hadn't seen Arbor for many years. She was a little emotional when she saw it again. Xiao Yao. The little fellow played with his two small hands and ran forward. He wanted to take the clothes, but the palace maid who was holding the clothes stepped aside and bowed in fear. Master, which one do you want to wear? Xiao Yao bent down to help her put on her shoes first, and then pulled her to sit down and dress up. If you don't like anything, Xiao Yao will ask someone to prepare it. Arbor glanced over and saw dozens of girls holding clothes in their hands. She was dazzled. Whatever. Since when was she so particular? He casually pointed at the first girl. That can't be done casually. If Master is unhappy, His Highness will be angry. Xiao Yao smiled as she combed Ji Yunchu's messy black hair. She knew that her little mistress didn't care for a head full of jewels and jades, so she only took 2 light and delicate beads to decorate her hair. Arbor reached out and touched her small face that was so ordinary that it couldn't be found in a pile of embarrassing people. This is the Eastern Palace. Waking up in the palace, even a fool would know what happened in the middle of the night. The little fellow secretly ground her teeth. No wonder she slept so well. The crown prince must have drugged her again and secretly carried her back to the palace. Bastard! Where's that bastard? This baby wasn't happy. Xiao Yao put down the comb, and her small hand stiffened. She coughed lightly and said, His Highness has to meet with officials in the South Study at this time. He'll be back a little later. Humph. I also have things to do. Xiao Mu casually picked up a robe that a palace maid was holding and put it on. She was about to walk out of the bedroom. Unfortunately, before she could take 2 steps, she was pushed back by a strong force. Her small mouth gaped open, and the little fellow reached out to hold her head in shock. Arbor focused her eyes and saw that the entire bedroom was surrounded by an abnormal airflow. It was like a soft and transparent cover, wrapping her inside. Xiao Yao covered her mouth and snickered. Little master, don't bother. You won't be able to leave. His Highness was worried that you would secretly run away again, so he temporarily placed a restriction on your body. Don't worry, it'll be fine as long as His Highness is back. Arbor. I'm worried. It's over. I'm going to sleep early today. I only slept for 4 hours yesterday. Life is hard. Chapter 548. It would have been fine if Xiao Yao didn't mention it, but now that she did, Arbor's pitiful little heart became unsettled and uneasy. Arbor reached out to pull Xiao Yao over. This young lady was now a tall and voluptuous young lady of 17 or 18 years old. She had a rosy goose-egg face and a pair of smiling eyes that were very lively. Little master, if you have any instructions, feel free to tell Xiao Yao, Xiao Yao said with a chuckle. Xiao Yao, can't I go out for a walk? It was rare for the sky to clear up, and it was her first time returning to the palace, so why couldn't she go out for a stroll? Xiao Yao shook her head like a rattledrum. That won't do, little master. You also saw it. His Highness set up layers of energy to surround the bedchamber. His Highness didn't give you the right to pass through, so you can't go out. This is a defensive barrier, right? Don't think that she didn't know what this thing was. Our dear Xiao Mu secretly ground her sharp teeth. She had seen Fan Qiuhe use this kind of large-scale defensive barrier in the past. It could instantly envelop several people or even more than a dozen people inside and resist external impacts. The defensive barrier's effect was comparable to that of a defensive mystic artifact. The difference was that the defensive barrier created by a defensive mystic artifact only had a defensive effect at best. But a defensive barrier created by a person was different. Being inside someone else's defensive barrier meant that your every move and every frown and smile would be in the eyes of the person who set up the barrier. As long as he wanted to, he could constantly pay attention to your every move. Of course, a person's defensive barrier couldn't be maintained for a long time. Ordinary little mystic cultivators couldn't create a defensive barrier at all. After all, how long it could be maintained, how strong its defensive power was closely related to the person's cultivation. If the mystic energy was exhausted, the defensive barrier would naturally disappear. However, the Crown Prince's actions left her speechless. He set up a defensive barrier for no reason, just to confine her from leaving. He didn't forget to set up a defensive barrier when he was discussing politics with someone in the southern study to constantly observe her movements. Didn't this consume his mystic energy? In addition, the defensive barrier that he had set up was extremely large. It had already enveloped an entire sleeping chamber. In that case, it would consume even more energy. Only, he did not know. Where had his cultivation reached? This kind of behavior of casually opening a large-scale defensive barrier was so willful that it made one's hair stand on end. Xiao Yao awkwardly laughed twice. She also felt that His Highness was too nervous. Little Master was already in the Eastern Palace. Where else could he run to? Entering and exiting the palace required an identity token. If he didn't give her the token, how could the Little Master leave? There were tens of thousands of Imperial guards patrolling the inner palace. They were not just for show. The chances of the young master sneaking out of the palace were too small. If Arbor knew what Xiao Yao was thinking, he would definitely snort at her. If I use an invisibility talisman, they won't be able to see me even if I sneak up to them. Not everyone's cultivation is higher than this baby's. As long as she was careful and avoided those with top-notch cultivation, how could ordinary guards stop her? Just as the two were talking, Xiao 11th Z walked in with a group of people carrying large chests. Arbor widened his eyes and stared straight at Xiao 11th Z and company. Xiao 11th Z and company hastily went forward to salute and said respectfully, "Miss, His Highness said that if Miss feels bored, you can read these medical books to relieve your boredom." Chapter 549. A quarter of an hour ago. The old physician in charge of the Imperial Physician Building was sprawled on top of an official box. Both his hands were tightly hugging the box that was under his body. Tears and snot were streaming down his face as he said, "No, no. You can't take these books away. You can't take a single book away. Imperial Physician Chao, I'm just borrowing them for a few days. I'll return them to you later." Xiao 11Z directed the people to move the boxes out. "No. Many of these medical books are hand-copied and limited edition books. There's only one of them, so I won't lend them to you. I can't lend them to you. If they're damaged, who am I going to ask for them?" Imperial Physician Chao held Xiao 11Z's leg tightly. "Return them to me, return them to me." Xiao 11Z's mouth twitched as he pulled his leg away, shouting, "Stop, stop. Imperial Physician Chao, where are your manners? This eunuch is under His Highness' orders to borrow your medical books to read for 2 days. I'll return them in a few days. You old fellow, stop making a fuss. Seeing the boxes being carried away before his eyes, Imperial Physician Chow's eyes rolled back, and he was about to faint after taking a deep breath. The nearby Imperial physicians quickly rushed over and patted the old physician's chest to soothe his breathing. Old Imperial Physician Chow, Old Imperial Physician Chow. Shao 11Z hurriedly waved at the group of people, and they ran away with the boxes, leaving the Imperial Physician building in a sorry state. They left behind a group of hopping physicians who were shouting furiously. Imperial Physician Chow's tears streamed down. Help me change my clothes, woo-woo. I'm going to lodge a complaint. At this moment, the little girl looked at the dozen or so boxes of books, then raised her head to look in a certain direction in the bedchamber and snorted. The Crown Prince must be secretly observing her. Otherwise, why could the palace maids and eunuchs enter and leave freely, but she couldn't? She stuck out a little finger and poked lightly. A ripple of energy appeared at the bedchamber's door, sucking her finger in and slowly flicking it away. Humph. Bad person. Inside the south study room, the group of officials quietly raised their heads and secretly glanced at His Highness. They discovered that the corners of His Highness's lips were slightly raised, and there was actually a hint of a smile in his eyes. This was something that was rarely seen in a few years. The official who had just reported a piece of bad news and was waiting for His Highness to scold him was dumbfounded. His Highness the Crown Prince didn't get angry. Instead, he calmly gave a few pointers and asked if there was anything else, then had them all withdraw. A few officials who were used to being scolded by His Highness, after coming out of the South Study, expressed that they were not used to it and were unable to accept it. Lord Song, don't be at your wits' end. From the Crown Prince's words, I believe that he will personally make a trip to Bailon. I heard that the first batch of seeds has already grown into vegetables. As long as we can grow something, even if it's slow, the bitter days will pass. Just now, the Minister of Revenue, Song Yuan, reported to His Highness that there had been no harvest in the Mo Kingdom capital recently, and the situation was very grim. There were also practically no clean non-mutated fish or prawns to be found in the nearby rivers. If this continued, the grain in the granary would run out in half a year. He originally thought that Her Highness would be annoyed and give him a scolding. However, Lord Song was not scolded. This was too surprising. Setting aside the barren lands in the west, compared to the many countries in the east and south, our northernmost grain reserves can already be considered very sufficient. An official sighed and said, if not for Her Highness' foresight, it wouldn't be too much to say that there would be starving people in the entire capital every day, and tens of thousands of corpses would be piled up. Everyone nodded repeatedly and walked out in discussion. Chapter 550. Mo Lien closed the document in her hand and stood up to walk outside. Shao 11Z wasn't present, so another young eunuch quickly followed behind the Crown Prince. Young aunt. The Crown Prince's footsteps paused, and he tossed him a piece of paper. Order the meal to be served according to the menu. The Crown Prince was suddenly being particular. Young Lu Z was a bit confused, and he followed with small steps. Your Highness, order the meal to be served in the bedchamber. Emichim, Mo Lien responded and waved his hand to have him leave. Then, he strode quickly towards his bedchamber. A moment later, she arrived at the entrance of the bedchamber. She waved her hand to dismiss the palace maids who were waiting to salute, then quietly walked inside. The little fellow was hugging a small jar of dried fruit and sitting on the brocade couch by the window. There was a thick medical book on her knees, and she would occasionally flip through a few pages. Xiao Yao, who was quietly standing to the side, raised her head to see him enter. She hurriedly wanted to salute him. Mo Lien reached out to stop her, and with an indifferent glance, Xiao Yao quietly bowed and left the bedchamber, leaving the large space for the two masters. Arbor was engrossed in reading, and her small hand unconsciously picked up a piece of dried fruit and nibbled on it. The vast amount of medical knowledge in her mind overlapped with that in the book. She discovered that many of the medicinal herbs in the book only had different names from the ones in her mind, but their usage were more or less the same. In fact, the things that appeared in her mind from time to time were much more accurate and effective. She had definitely accumulated a large amount of medical knowledge in the past, so there was basically no need to doubt this. After her death in her previous life, until her rebirth, during this period of time. What exactly happened? Was it during this period of time that she learned medical skills from Master? A thought flashed through her mind, and she suddenly sensed a familiar aura approaching. The little fellow abruptly raised her head, and the thick book in her hand had already been taken away by someone. The crown prince was dressed in formal attire, and his long hair was tied up with a crown. He looked a bit different from his usual plain clothes, and there was a hint of sharpness between his exquisite brows. "What are you doing?" Darling Qiao would get angry whenever she saw him. He had locked her in the room without saying a word, and now that he was back, he was provoking her and snatching her book without any explanation. Mo Lian threw the book to the ground and reached out to lift her up from behind. He whispered in her ear, "Don't you have anything to say to me?" Just as the little fellow stretched out his hand, it was firmly held by him. His entire body was wrapped up by his tyrannical aura, and he couldn't move at all. His little face immediately became a little angry. "In the past 2 years, did you miss me?" His head gently pressed against her slender neck, and he slowly nudged her. Qiao Mu's intuition told her that this fellow was angry, and her entire body stiffened. "Do you want to?" How could he not? When she thought about how his faint, smoke-like figure on the snowy peak had blocked the attack for her and disappeared with a bang, she felt extremely uncomfortable in her heart. She unconsciously bit her pink lips. "Forget it, I don't want to know." He whispered into her ear and tightened his arms around her waist, pulling her firmly into his embrace. "Mo. Emin. Let's eat first. Are you hungry?" He suddenly hugged her and stood up, calling for someone to bring in the food as if there was no one else present. A dozen dishes for 2 people was already extremely extravagant in today's world. Although his expression was as gentle as jade, his actions were elegant, and he attentively picked up food for her to eat. But Arbor felt uncomfortable in his heart. Chapter 551. This person was clearly suppressing a bellyful of anger, but he didn't say anything. It was so annoying to look at. "Just say what you have to say." Arbor tossed her chopsticks and said angrily, "I'm not eating anymore." The 2 royal maids who were accompanying them abruptly glared. They had never seen anyone who dared to be so impudent in front of the crown prince. "Rest if you're not eating." Mo Lian stood up and silently tossed his chopsticks aside. He reached out to grab her small hand. The little stoic was instantly enraged. She wanted to fling his hand away but failed. Her eyes were brimming with anger. "You're ridiculous." Crown Prince Mo gazed at her silently. The more he was like this, the angrier the little stoic became. She turned around and ran out of the bedchamber. Mo Lian's figure flashed, and he instantly blocked her path. The little fellow ran without thinking and bumped into his arms. "Where are you going? You still want to return to the Qin estate? Are you that reluctant to part with that Omega Kotoku?" Mo Lian instantly flew into a rage. He hugged her and turned her small face to face him. Why did he mention Omega Kotoku for no reason? Arbor struggled with her small arms and legs, but how could she break free? She angrily punched him. "I'm telling you, the Qin estate has already been surrounded. The houses collapsed and so many officials' families were injured. A dangerous level 4 zombie also appeared in the estate. Right now, all of them are under observation. Not a single one can come out. The crown prince grabbed her small chin and stared straight into her black and bright eyes. He roared angrily, "We encountered an assassin in their Qin estate, and Mo Jiao's head was also smashed open. Attacking the royal family is unforgivable. We must confiscate their Qin family." "Fine, we'll confiscate it. Why are you yelling at me?" Our dear Qiao Mu was extremely angry and kicked him. His Highness was used to this signature kick, so he didn't mind it at all. However, the surrounding royal maids and eunuchs were all scared witless, and they lowered their heads and prostrated themselves on the ground. "You're not worried?" Mo Lian's expression eased slightly. "What do I have to worry about? You speak eccentrically all day long. If you're angry, just let it out. Don't hold it in." Arbor angrily kicked him a few times, leaving a row of small footprints on his robe. Mo Lian was instantly angered to the point of laughter. Carrying the little thing in her arms, she parted the curtains and walked into the inner room. She coldly said, "All of you, leave." "Shouldn't I be angry?" He threw her onto the soft brocade on the side of the bed and leaned in close, his breath completely enveloping her. "You didn't leave a single word behind and ran away for more than 2 years without saying a word. When we met again, you were already in the Qin estate. That damned Omega Kotoku. Was he even worthy of being her protector?" I. Arbor immediately withered. The little fellow knew that she was in the wrong, but she still couldn't help but say, "Then don't blame me." Mo Lian laughed angrily. "How am I weird? You're obviously so angry that you can't wait to beat me up, but you still look like you're bathing in the spring breeze. Isn't it uncomfortable to hold it in? Oh, so you're saying that even if I don't hit you, you'll still remember. All right then, let's fight." He suddenly reached out and pressed her down on his long legs. Darling Qiao was immediately stupefied. "What? This immoral ghost, is there anyone who cheats people like you?" Seeing his palm fall, Arbor was about to die from anger. Why was she so stupid? Wasn't she asking for a beating? However, in the next second, he flipped her over and hugged her, his warm fingers gently caressing her small face. How could he bear to hit his darling? Chapter 552. You'll be of marriageable age in 3 months, right? He changed the topic too quickly. Darling Qiao couldn't keep up with his pace. Qiao Mu gave a muffled emichem. Her small face was still puffed up with anger as he held her in his arms. "Actually, I'm not angry at you." Mo Lian lifted her face and nuzzled her forehead. "I'm angry at myself. I couldn't protect you properly. You don't know how much pain and self-reproach I felt when I saw those withered vines and broken trees on the snowy peak," he murmured in her ear. "But all of that is in the past now. I don't want to know anything or think about anything. I just want you to stay by my side. From this moment on, don't leave me again." Arbor actually didn't want to argue with him, but for some reason, she felt a bit angry when she saw his gentle mask earlier. Now that the two of them had a heated argument, this little fella felt more at ease. When she heard him say that, her boundless guilt was aroused, and she timidly looked at him and said, Sorry." Speaking of which, she was willful in front of him and was used to acting coquettishly. She really couldn't bear the slightest bit of grievance from him. However, his lukewarm attitude just now made her feel aggrieved and gloomy. Arbor's eyes reddened, and she reflexively wrapped her arms around his neck. She pitifully said, Mo Lian, I didn't disappear on purpose. It was just that I felt too bad at that time, so I didn't want to think about anything. Murong Sun is dead, Mo Lian. She originally said she would attend my marriageable age ceremony, but she died. She's a big liar. Mo Lien gently patted her back. When he thought of how helpless she was at that time, his heart couldn't help but ache. Sect Master is dead, and Master is also dead. The feral you gave me broke, and Big Treasure is also dead. They're all dead, and I'm the only one left. Nonsense, how could you be the only one? No matter what, I will always be by your side. Do you understand? Jojo, you have to trust me more, okay? Arbor couldn't help but nod when he saw his focused and expectant eyes. Mo Lien's lips turned up as he stroked her small head in satisfaction. You don't know this, but when I brought your parents to the capital, I didn't even dare to say anything to them. You only lied to them that you were cultivating in the Holy Water sect. Do you know how much they missed you? But I only know how to harm others. Nonsense. Mo Lien suddenly reached out to cover her small mouth. How can the Holy Water sex incident be blamed on you? That's because people's hearts aren't what they used to be. Greed causes mischief. It's not your fault. Don't worry. No matter what, we'll get our revenge. Mo Lien hugged her and gently shook her little body. Promise me, baby, don't let your imagination run wild, okay? I'll send you home tomorrow. Are you okay? He cupped her little face and looked at her. Your parents and family all miss you very much. How could anyone reject such an offer? Arbor nodded gloomily. While you're at it, have Royal Father issue a betrothal edict and send it to your home as well. Prince Mo hugged this baby and approached her with a grin. Okay. His gentle unpersuasive tone and his picturesque features made a certain little person nod gloomily. She didn't have time to think about it carefully. Then she abruptly widened her eyes. Betrothal. Who? Mo Lien held back his laughter and tapped her little nose before pointing at himself. You and me. Chapter 553. The little stoic's expression abruptly became exuberant. Her small mouth gaped slightly, and she was momentarily stunned. You can't go back on your word. You nodded yourself just now, and you even nodded 3 times in a row. I counted. Mo Lien's eyes darkened slightly, and his lustrous fingers touched her soft lips. He really wanted to kiss her. A turbulent thought surfaced in his heart, but he forcefully suppressed it. Darling is still young, don't scare her first. It wouldn't be good if he scared her away again. Look. No matter what, we've been together for 7 to 8 years, so we should at least confirm each other's status, right? Prince Mo said as he swayed her small body. Don't be scared, darling. We're just confirming our status, nothing else. He couldn't resist lowering his head and kissing her dazed little face. Soft and sticky, the texture was really good. When you weren't here, I would be filial to my in-laws every 2 to 3 days. They especially like me. Mo Lien suppressed her laughter and said seriously, don't worry, your in-laws definitely won't object to this. Stop. Arbor felt that she increasingly couldn't keep up with the Crown Prince's train of thought. You? Didn't you say before that we were friends? That we were friends? The words were still ringing in her ears. But didn't you say you didn't have any friends? Mo Lien looked at her seriously and said solemnly, I thought about it. If we don't have any friends, then so be it. We won't be friends anymore. The title of husband and wife is good, what do you think? What else can I say? You're about to betroth me. Don't be fooled by how he kept asking if it was good. In reality, he had already made up his mind. A certain darling was dumbfounded and couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. Mo Lien was laughing uncontrollably on the inside, but she still maintained a serious expression. She reached out to lift the little girl's chin and stroked it. Darling. My suggestion is very good, right? Let's do it like this. Tomorrow, we'll pass down this betrothal decree while we're at it. Okay. Why did she keep feeling like something was off? Arbor blinked and wanted to say something. Prince Mo continued, "Don't worry, it's just a matter of settling the marriage before your hairpin ceremony, nothing else will be affected. Look at you, you're already so old. Men should get married when they're of age. Don't be afraid of getting married. Be good." "But, is it that simple to issue an edict?" Arbor asked blankly. Mo Lien smiled and lowered his head. While she was in a daze, he kissed her again. "Don't worry, baby. I can handle it." If his father dared to stop him from marrying a wife. That night, Mo Lien went to the imperial study and talked with the great king for more than 2 hours before leaving with the imperial edict. This matter immediately caused the princes and concubines who heard the news to be unable to sit still. They all sent people out to find out what the crown prince and the great king had discussed in secret in the study. Unfortunately, the news was tightly sealed, and no one was able to find anything. After the crown prince went to the imperial study to ask for the imperial edict, Arbor walked around the bedchamber without stopping for a moment. He felt that he had been tricked by someone. What did he mean by it was just a simple title and nothing else? Wasn't it just a title given by the country's heir apparent? Crown Princess. Wasn't the betrothal a bit too hasty? She was an unknown daughter of the small Chow family. If she suddenly became the crown princess, it would definitely cause a huge uproar in the capital. Arbor reached out to massage her head. She heard the voices of the palace servants. She saw a person dressed in a moon-white casual robe. His features were picturesque as he walked towards her with a smile. In an instant, Arbor felt that all her worries had disappeared. Who cares? Everything will be fine when it comes to it. Today ended. Chapter 554. Early the next morning, when the sky was still just beginning to brighten, a marriage decree was delivered to the Chow estate, immediately stunning the entire family and even the entire capital. The Chow family, from the elderly matriarch to the servants, all knelt in front of the main hall to receive the decree. When they heard the edict say, "The Chow estate's eldest miss has a gentle, refined, and virtuous character, and is specifically designated as the crown prince's consort," some of the maids and servants who didn't know a certain child very well didn't express anything. They just had dumbfounded expressions. But the elderly matriarch couldn't help but twitch her mouth. Who said this? Who exactly was it? Could Chow Mu, that little girl, be worthy of these 8 words? Gentle character and whatnot, could you stop joking around? At the end of the imperial decree, it even mentioned Xiao Zhongbang and Wei Ziqin. The great king said that the husband and wife had rendered meritorious service in raising the crown princess and specially promoted Xiao Zhongbang to be the Marquis of Jiayuan. His wife, Madame Ne Wei, was conferred the title of a third-rank noble lady and bestowed a marquis estate, jewelry, gems, brocades, food, and so on. The husband and wife looked at each other in bewilderment, unable to make heads or tails of this. On the contrary, second Uncle Chiao immediately poked his eldest brother and gave him a look to quickly receive the decree. Old Chiao's eldest son and wife hurriedly kowtowed to express their gratitude and respectfully received the imperial decree. Second Uncle Chiao chuckled as he handed the decree, delivering eunuch 5 zhang of cloth, very generous. Nowadays, it was more appropriate to give cloth and food than gold, silver, and gems. Now that Dreamy production was about to stop, the price of cloth also rose steadily by the day. The Mo Kingdom capital was still considered good, and its inventory was still abundant. In some of the other fortifications, the commoners' clothes hadn't been changed for several years and could last another 2 years with some mending. The 5 zhang of cloth that second Uncle Chiao gave could be exchanged for 3 liters of rice, enough for a normal family to live frugally for half a month. Thus, this was considered a generous reward. The decree-delivering eunuch beamed as he accepted it, his attitude toward the Chow family much better and his words full of flattery. This residence in the Chow estate had been gifted to them by the Crown Prince when they first entered the capital. However, when the Crown Prince was trying to worm his way into being friends with his parents-in-law, he had never revealed his identity to them, so the couple was still in the dark. After receiving the edict, everyone in the Chow estate hurriedly packed their things and brought their family members, young and old, to move to the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate. The Marquis of Jiayuan's estate was located on Minshun Avenue in the Mo Kingdom capital. Just its scale alone was extremely grand, with several courtyards inside. Just the gardens alone were divided into 5 or 6 sizes, with pavilions, terraces, and pavilions. The scenery was superb. Everyone naturally left the largest Nanju garden to the Crown Princess, while the others chose their own courtyards to stay in. The Chow family had very few people. After the entire family moved in, more than half of the Marquis's estate would be empty. In recent years, old Madame Dowager had not been able to do as she wished. After moving into Longevity Court, she hurriedly went to rest. Only Wei Ziqin was left to take care of the household matters, such as arranging the servants and counting the gifts bestowed by the emperor. An hour later, the news of the Crown Princess's betrothal had already spread throughout the entire capital. When Queen Zhao heard that the great king had appointed her precious son to such a baffling family, how could she sit still? She immediately brought along her personal nanny and hurried to the great king's royal study. At this time, the entire Mo Kingdom capital had already exploded into a pot of congee. From the princes, dukes, marquis, and ministers to the commoners picking up rubbish, everyone was talking about, "Did you hear? The great king decreed His Highness the Crown Prince's betrothal." Chapter 555. The Crown Princess had never seen her in person and had only heard of her name. She had never appeared in front of anyone, but she had already become a hot topic both inside and outside Northernmost Court. Talisman patrician family Mu Qianqian flew into a rage inside her room and smashed everything that could be smashed into smithereens. When Madame Mu entered and saw the mess on the floor, her brows twitched, and her heart ached immensely. The current situation wasn't good, so food had to be exchanged for things that were smashed. The family's stockpile of food wasn't enough for her daughter to squander like this. Thus, every item that was smashed was one less item. If this continued, this Miss Mu's boudoir would soon become empty. "Alright, what's the use of throwing a tantrum?" Madame Mu grumpily said, "You're just making a fool of yourself in front of the second and third branches by making a scene here. Who dares to make fun of me?" Mu Qianqian's long, shapely brows shot up, and her hatred was hard to conceal. "What Marquis of Jiayuan's estate? I've never heard of it before. I don't know where this little bitch came from, but she stole a man's soul in an instant. She really is a shameless bitch. Yo! Look at what eldest miss is saying. She is the crown princess that the great king has officially betrothed. It's fine if eldest miss says this at home. But if this gets out, there's no doubt that our Mu family isn't strict in our upbringing, teaching a young lady to speak filthy words. It's fine if eldest miss is shameless, but don't drag so many unmarried young ladies in the estate down with you." A middle-aged woman in a luxurious gown chuckled as she walked in, followed by a young girl of similar age to Mu Qianqian, who was covering her mouth as she chuckled. When Madame Mu saw this woman, she immediately flared up in anger and bellowed at the maidservants, "Are you all dead? Don't you know how to announce the arrival of the second branches, madam? Hey, eldest sister-in-law, don't randomly blame the servants. We did announce her arrival. It's just that the sound of eldest miss throwing a tantrum and smashing things was drowned out by the sound of the announcement. Don't say that we, the mother and daughter of the second branch, are rude. Madame Mu looked at her sister-in-law's sarcastic words and was so jealous that her stomach hurt. She waved her hand impatiently and said, all right, Madame Lu, who doesn't know that you came here today to laugh at our first branch? Now that you're done, you can leave. This madam won't be seeing you off. Hey, look at what sister-in-law is saying. I'm not here to laugh at you. The second branch's Madame Lu, chuckled as she pulled her daughter, Mu Jilan, over. I just wanted to tell sister-in-law. Tomorrow, Her Majesty the Queen will hold a banquet and invite the 3 dukes and 5 marquises. Oh no, my mouth really doesn't know how to talk. Madame Lu giggled and lightly patted her own mouth. It should be the 6 marquises' residences now. The 3 dukes and 6 marquises' young ladies from the various aristocratic families will all be attending the banquet. Our family's eldest young miss is naturally unwilling to pass on this responsibility, but we can't do anything about eldest young miss' bad mood. For fear of ruining the entire banquet, sister-in-law, I volunteered to mention it to the family head. The family head agreed to let our Jilan attend the banquet in eldest young miss's place tomorrow. I'm really sorry, eldest sister. Mu Jilan chuckled softly. All of a sudden, Mu Qianqian couldn't suppress the fury that shot out from the bottom of her heart. A bright yellow talisman flew over and directly smashed towards Mu Jilan. Bitch, you're all bitches. Mu Jilan's eyes narrowed slightly. She wasn't someone to be trifled with either. With a flick of her finger, a talisman also flew out. The 2 talismans collided in midair and split apart. Chapter 556. Arbor didn't know what kind of ruckus the entire Mo Kingdom capital was in right now. She slept soundly until the sun was high in the sky. When she opened her eyes, she discovered that it was almost noon. The Crown Prince was grinning as he propped up his chin and sat by the bed, gazing at her. When their eyes met, Arbor immediately shrunk her head into the brocade quilt wrapped in a cocoon. What was going on? That guy's slightly raised phoenix eyes looked very alluring. Once she accidentally touched them, she felt like her heart skipped a beat. It was very baffling. She shrunk into the quilt and calmly reached out to check her pulse. It was quite normal. Her body was very healthy. Suddenly, the quilt was lifted into the air. The little fellow, who was wrapped in the quilt, hastily poked her head out. What are you doing? Get up, change clothes, and eat something. We still have to rush back to your maternal home. If we don't leave now, we won't even make it for lunch. In any case, we have to go back and have a reunion dinner. Reunion dinner again. The little fellow unhappily pursed her lips. Don't you have to go to the southern study to handle matters today? It's done. The Crown Prince beamed as he took out a clean and moist handkerchief to wipe the little fellow's face. How efficient am I? If we finish things early, we can stay at your maternal home for a whole day today. Xiao Yao, who was holding clothes at the side, pursed her lips and smiled. I'll do it myself. Arbor reached out to take the clothes, but the Crown Prince avoided her hand and insisted on letting her wear them. Today, she changed into a light yellow robe with large sleeves, embellishing the little one with pink and tender skin. She then draped an extremely rare moon-white ice mink overcoat over it. The furry collar framed her ordinary little face until it was moist and rosy. After Xiao Yao finished braiding her hair and pasting on the beaded flowers, the little fellow sat in front of the dressing mirror and took out some medicinal powder to rub on her face. The Crown Prince raised a brow and looked at her with a grin. This little thing was finally willing to reveal its true appearance. As our dear Qiao Mu fiddled with her small face, she was still unconvinced. Let me ask you, how did you, Duan Yu, and Situ Yi recognize me at a glance? Mo Lian said with a smile, Duan Yu and Situ Yi, those 2 fellows, definitely got it right by chance. Of course it's because of you, Prince said as he walked behind her. Jojo's every frown and smile is engraved in the depths of my heart. Even if I'm blindfolded, I can still see. Mo Lien was stunned. She paused for a moment before saying, I recognized you. The little fellow turned her head to look at him. That little face without any makeup overlapped with the one in his memory. No, she was even more beautiful than he had imagined her to be when she grew up. Xiao Yao also widened her eyes and said excitedly, Little miss, you've become prettier. That's right, that's why I said, how could such a beautiful and adorable young lady be so ordinary when she grew up? I didn't dare to say anything these past 2 days. She was afraid of touching on Mrs. Sore Spot. She originally thought that a good-looking young lady would become ordinary when she grew up. Arbor looked at her speechlessly. The Crown Prince couldn't help but laugh, and he reached out to lead the little girl to his side. Let's go, we'll take a carriage over. Oh right, you might not know yet. Your father has been conferred the title of Marquis of Jiayuan. The entire Chiao family has moved to the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate on Minshan Avenue, right next to Minister Song's residence. Chapter 557. Needless to say, those who lived on Minshan Avenue were definitely influential families. The Marquis' estate's neighbors were probably all high officials of the court, so the entire estate's class was immediately raised by quite a bit. The Crown Prince's carriage left the Eastern Palace and unimpeded through the northernmost Huabei Gate. After passing through Anshuan Avenue, which was located in the central axis, they would arrive at Minshan Avenue after turning a corner. It could be seen that Minshan Avenue's location was extremely good. The carriages of high officials and nobles came and went, and very few commoners dared to set up stalls and cause trouble here. The Crown Prince was traveling in a low-key manner this time and didn't bring many people with him. There were only 20 royal guardsmen escorted by He Tian. He Tian had already been promoted from a lowly centurion to the deputy commander of the royal guard as an exception. Of course, this was also due to the Crown Prince's trust. It was said that his father, He Qijing, would also be promoted this year. As long as nothing strange happened, the position of Minister of Works was basically within his grasp. Just as Arbor was nervously following a certain Crown Prince back to the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate, a shabby donkey cart appeared at the Mo Kingdom capital's western city gate. It pulled 6 or 7 weary-looking people to the very end of the line to enter the city. A family of 3 followed behind the donkey cart. Their clothes were ragged, and they were so emaciated that they almost didn't look human. Because a level 4 zombie had appeared in the Qin estate, the Mo Kingdom capital was currently under martial law, and the northern and southern city gates were closed. Only the eastern and western city gates allowed entry and exit. But according to the rules, commoners and some peddlers could only go through the western city gate. Thus, the line to enter the city was very long as it was nearing noon. In consideration of the commoners, there was no need to pay any fees to enter and exit the Mo Kingdom capital. However, the situation these 2 days was very special, so the speed of inspection and clearance was extremely slow. The Mo Kingdom capital was Northern Mo's largest city, so the quality of the city guards was extremely high. Nothing unpleasant happened, and although the line was long, it was very orderly. The people on the donkey cart kept craning their necks to look at the entrance of the city gate, their eyes filled with longing. They all had disheveled hair and dirty faces, not much better than the ragged family of 3 behind them. Auntie Nyo, is what you said true? If I come to the Mo Kingdom capital, will I be able to find Granny and the rest? The young woman who spoke had a tanned face from being exposed to the sun and wind. Her figure was very thin, and she was holding the hand of a 12-year-old son who was also thin and small. His cheeks were so thin that they were sunken in. Hey, you don't believe me? I'm telling you, Su Jiao, your mother-in-law and the eldest branch's family are living very well. In the past, they were doing very well in Shizhou City. 2 years ago, they moved out of Shizhou City without a word. I spent a lot of time and effort before finding out that they came to the Mo Kingdom capital. The old woman who spoke had an envious look in her eyes. She had a protruding chin, revealing her thick black teeth when she opened her mouth. Su Jiao was precisely the daughter-in-law of old Xiao's third branch. Ever since the day of the zombie outbreak, old Xiao's third branch's family of 3 had been completely unlucky. Back then, they didn't manage to hitch a ride on the eldest branch's cart and were left behind in the village. As they fled, they almost lost their lives. If it weren't for her family's Qiao Zhongheng erupting with a special ability at the crucial moment, how could the mother and son have escaped the tiger's den? They might have long been fed to a large pile of zombies. Because they left in a hurry, they practically didn't take anything with them. The Qiao family of 3 didn't want to recall their past misery. Chapter 559. Not to mention how Su Jiao's party had persistently searched for the Qiao family's whereabouts after entering the city with evil intentions. The Crown Prince's carriage had already entered Minshan Avenue. When they were a dozen meters away from the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate, they saw a bunch of half-grown brats crowding around a corner, kicking and punching something. "Young master, is it about time?" This punk actually dared to speak rudely to young master. He deserves to be beaten to death. Continue beating. A small boy's clear and crisp voice rang out as he harumphed, "He actually dares to scold me time and time again. Beat him to death for me." Hee, Xiao Sen, I heard that this guy seems to be the youngest son of Taichung Temple's deputy minister. If we beat him to death, will something happen? What can happen? I have big brother here. The small boy raised his head and harumphed with his hands on his hips. Let's see if he still dares to oppose me in the academy in the future. I'll beat whoever I want to beat. Beat him. Use more strength, did you not eat? Haha, that's right. We could beat him without fail in the past, let alone now. Now, your dad has been conferred the title of Marquis of Jiayuan by the great king. You're the only son of a marquis, who dares to provoke you? Gao Fong, what are you wasting your breath for? Hurry and use more strength. I'm telling you, if you can't cripple him today, don't even think about having an easy time. Young master, can we do it if he's crippled? Why can't we do it? My big brother will take care of everything. Beat him as much as you want. Beat him ruthlessly. The small boy directed his lackeys to beat and kick the boy who had curled up into a ball in the circle. All right, young master, rest and watch this one exert his strength. Arbor was still in the carriage when he clenched his small fists tightly. The Crown Prince coughed and was just about to say something when he was abruptly glared at by the little one's clear and cold eyes. His heart instantly thumped, and he inwardly cursed. The big brother he's talking about is you. Arbor's lips curled slightly as he asked coldly. Jojo, listen to me. Prince cursed his brother-in-law in his heart. Xiao Sen is still young. Let's teach him slowly. Arbor didn't want to pay any more attention to him. He lifted the curtain with a swish, and before the carriage came to a stop, he jumped down, frightening the coachman. What are you doing? Why aren't you stopping yet? Xiao Mu shouted angrily. The 7 or 8 youths who were beating up the other youths simultaneously stopped and turned around to look. When they saw the young lady in front of them looking at them with her cold eyes, they couldn't help but shiver slightly. Intimidated by her terrifying aura, they all huddled together. Arbor's gaze fell on a 7 or 8-year-old boy in the front row. Draped in a thick deer fur cloak and wearing a brocade robe embroidered with golden thread, the little boy had red lips, white teeth, and bright eyes. His little face was red from the cold wind, and he was very cute. Looking at the lively little person in front of him, Arbor's cold eyes loosened a bit. "You, who are you? Why are you poking your nose into my business?" The little boy looked at Arbor with an inexplicable fear in his heart. He opened his mouth, but still straightened his neck and scolded. When the Crown Prince heard that this was bad, he hurriedly lifted the curtain and stepped down from the carriage. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Arbor laugh coldly. "You're so young, yet you don't learn good things. You're acting like a hedonistic son of a rich family. Why aren't you letting him go?" She shouted angrily, and the servant who was pressing down the little boy with a bruised nose and swollen face was so shocked that he retracted his hand and subconsciously trembled. Chapter 560. The little boy was also enraged. He stepped forward and kicked that boy with a bruised nose and a swollen face. Placing both hands on his waist, he roared fearlessly, "Who is he to you? If you want to stand up for him, you have to figure out who I am first. I'm telling you. In this Mo Kingdom capital, no one dares to provoke me, little tyrant Xiao Sen." The Crown Prince sweated profusely from the side. "Fuck, you already proclaimed yourself as little tyrant, so what else could the Crown Prince say?" The Crown Prince wished for nothing more than to go up and cover that child's mouth. He face-bombed and called out, "Jojo." He was thinking about how to put in a few good words for his little brother-in-law to smooth over this matter. This child really hit the jackpot today. This child was clearly very obedient in front of the elders on normal days. Why was he so unlucky today? Arbor turned back in anger and glared fiercely at the Crown Prince. The fury in his heart rushed up from the darkest corner at once. He rushed forward in 3 steps, picked up his little brother with one hand, and slapped him twice on the back without any explanation. These 2 slaps weren't light either. Our dear Xiao Sen had never suffered this kind of grievance since he was young, and he started crying with a wah. The 2 henchmen beside him were anxious. They rolled up their sleeves, wanting to pick a fight with Arbor as they cursed, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You don't want to live anymore. You even dare to provoke the little sir of our Marquis of Jeyuan's estate." Seeing that things were getting out of hand, the Crown Prince hurriedly shouted, "Stop." Our dear Xiao Sen hadn't seen this lord at first, but when he heard the familiar voice, he turned around and looked like he had seen a relative he hadn't seen in 800 years. He shook his little arms and legs, wailing as he struggled to break free from Arbor's grasp. He raised both hands in Prince Mo's direction and shouted with all his might, "Big brother, big brother. Big brother, save me, big brother." However, his big brother couldn't save him today either. Not only couldn't he save him, but Big Brother also had a bad feeling. It was very likely that he would be thoroughly implicated by this pig of a brother-in-law. That it was over. The Crown Prince stole a glance at the little fellow's expression. It was really over. The little lass had gotten angry. That stoic face was already completely filled with fury, and her eyes were even more blazing. "Come with me. Come with me to someone else's house and apologize." Arbor reprimanded angrily. "You want me to apologize to him?" Xiao Sen jumped up like an angry little animal. With 2 lines of tears on his face, he shouted angrily, "I'm not going. I'm the young master of the Marquis estate. Who does he think he is? His father was just a small government official. I won't apologize to him." The Crown Prince ran over to cover his brother-in-law's mouth, but it was too late. Xiao Mu had already kicked her younger brother in anger. She was extremely measured in this kick, so it was actually not heavy. It was just that it made our dear Xiao Sen sprawl on the ground. Feeling especially ashamed, he opened his mouth and started bawling loudly. The Crown Prince hurriedly rushed forward and picked up his brother-in-law. Arbor ignored him. He reached out and pulled the little boy who was being beaten to his side. He patted his dirty little robe and held his little hand. Don't be afraid. You're a good child. Big sister will definitely make that bad child apologize to you. That little boy was also a tough nut to crack. He looked to be about the same age as Xiao Xin, but he didn't utter a word after being beaten to this extent. He didn't even shed a single tear. Xiao Xin stayed in the crown prince's arms. When he heard Arbor call him a bad child, he immediately refused to comply. He cried and yelled, "I'm not a bad child, I'm not a bad child. Big brother," she scolded me. Big brother. Chapter 561. The Crown Prince's face was full of helplessness. He reached out and lightly pinched his waist, saying softly, "Shut up, this is your sister. Your big sister is back." Little Xiao Sen's stupefied face was still hanging with 2 lines of tears. His expression was especially comical. The Crown Prince glared at him, annoyed and amused. He said softly to him, "You've angered your sister quite badly, let me tell you. You have to coax her properly. Otherwise, if you're unlucky, I'll also be unlucky with you." Big sister. The big sister that father and mother often talked about, the one who went to a super large sect to cultivate. Little Xiao Xin immediately became listless. "Look at how you've beaten him up. I don't believe that this is what mother taught you. Bullying others with your power. Utterly unreasonable." Arbor was so angry that he wanted to go up and beat this stinking brat. The Crown Prince hurriedly stopped him and smiled apologetically. "Jojo, your brother is still young. Don't hit him, don't hit him. Go away. Don't protect him all the time. Look at how you've taught him. At such a young age, you've earned yourself the title of the capital's little overlord. You've really given old Xiao's family face." Little Xiao Xin shrank into the Crown Prince's embrace and looked at his fuming sister in silence, sobbing and unable to speak. "Get down and immediately go to their house with me to apologize. I'm telling you, if you don't apologize today, I'll... apologize, apologize." Little Sen is very obedient, he'll definitely go and apologize. The Crown Prince hurriedly pulled down the little fellow's raised hand and winked at his brother-in-law. I am sorry, Ren Hongfei. I won't bully you in the future. In the academy, I'll take care of you." When the little fellow saw the Crown Prince's expression, he immediately wilted and hurriedly apologized to the little boy with a bruised nose and swollen face. Go to his house. Arbor was so angry that he didn't enter the Qiao estate's main gate. He directly pulled the 2 children into the carriage and turned his head to the side with a sullen face, not saying a word. The Crown Prince's heart was beating like a drum as he watched. He went up and secretly hooked her little finger, but Miss Qiao threw him away. The Crown Prince's handsome face immediately turned green. It's over. This time, he was really dragged down by his pig-like brother-in-law. What to do? The Crown Prince's carriage made a detour to the residence of Ren Pingjing, the deputy minister of Taichung Temple. Ren Pingjing was practicing calligraphy in his study when he heard that His Highness the Crown Prince had come. He immediately called his wife and 2 sons to change clothes and go out to welcome the Crown Prince's carriage. His mind was in a daze. This official greets Your Highness. I did not know Your Highness is coming. Wei Qin did not go out to meet you. Ren Pingjing, together with his wife and son, hastily opened the front door and went out to greet Wei Qin. Compared to the empty Minshun Avenue, the path in front of the Taichung Temple's deputy minister's house appeared to be extremely lively. When the commoners heard that the Crown Prince's carriage had arrived at Sir Ren's residence, they hurriedly knelt down to pay their respects. Welcome, Your Highness. Madame Ren was a typical sweet-tempered woman. Although she was anxious when she saw her youngest son being led over with a bloody nose and a swollen face, she didn't criticize him. Instead, she gently brought her eldest son and second son to greet him. The Crown Prince was a little embarrassed. He reached out and shook Arbor's little hand. "This is the Crown Princess." Our dear Crown Princess was in a fit of anger. She couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him and slapped his hand away. Ren Pingjing and Madame Ren were astonished for a moment. When they saw the young lady in front of them clearly, they couldn't help but sigh inwardly and hurriedly went up to greet her. "Greetings, Crown Princess." Chapter 562. Qiao Xin, kneel down. Arbor turned her head and looked at her younger brother sternly. The Crown Prince, who was despised by his wife, coughed lightly and reminded his brother-in-law that it was best not to anger his sister at this time. Qiao Xin knelt down aggrievedly and lowered his head. He didn't look like the little tyrant in the academy at all. Arbor led Ren Hongfei to Madame Ren and bowed. Sir Ren and Madame Ren were so shocked that they hurriedly moved away and returned the greeting. "Sir Ren, Madame Ren, I'm really sorry. My younger brother was negligent in disciplining him and beat your son to this state. I'm really worried." Arbor said softly, "On the way here, I already examined your son. Fortunately, they are all superficial wounds, so I'll give this bottle of pills to your son. Take the red pills orally and apply them externally. He will recover in 2 days." "Crown Princess, you're exaggerating." Sir Ren and Madame Ren bowed. Arbor shook her head. "It's my younger brother's fault." Arbor glanced coldly at Qiao Xin, who was sneaking glances at her, and said, "Xiao Yao, go get the feral." Xiao Yao glanced at the miserable Qiao Xin and hurriedly begged for mercy. "Miss, young master is still young and insensible. He won't dare to do this again in the future. Let's forget about it this time. He'll be 8 years old after the new year. Look at the 8-year-old children in other families. Which one of them is as crafty and undisciplined as him? Where are the books and etiquette that he learned in the academy?" Arbor looked coldly at Xiao Yao. "Are you not going to listen to what I say?" "Yes." Xiao Yao immediately shriveled and hurriedly turned around to get the feral. Madame Ren wanted to stop her, but Arbor stopped her. She turned around and stared coldly at Qiao Senior. "Do you admit defeat when elder sister hit you today?" "Elder sister, I know I was wrong." Qiao Xin looked fearfully at the cold feral and looked pleadingly at the Crown Prince who was standing at the side. Prince received his brother-in-law's gaze and hurriedly reached out to pull Arbor's small hand. "Jojo, Xiao Xin knows he's wrong. Let's." "You're still protecting him." Arbor was furious. He pushed the Crown Prince's hand away and shouted at his younger brother, "Hand." Qiao Xin shuddered and raised his little hand involuntarily. "Paw." The ruler landed on his tiny palm, causing little Qiao Xin to tremble in pain as he burst into tears. After 3 slaps, Crown Prince saw that his brother-in-law's hands were red and swollen, crying pitifully. He couldn't bear it and went forward to grab his little wife. "Jojo, that's enough. Xiao Sen will definitely be obedient in the future. Don't worry, he'll definitely remember this and won't bully his classmates in the future." As he spoke, he quickly winked at Qiao. Senator Qiao Sen wailed, "Sister, I was wrong. Sister, sob sob sob." Madame Ren didn't dare to offend the Crown Prince's brother-in-law and hurriedly tried to dissuade him, saying that it was just children playing around and shouldn't be taken too seriously. After sending off the furious Crown Princess, the couple looked at each other and pulled their youngest son in front of them to take a closer look. Sure enough, they saw that the wounds on his hands and face had been carefully treated. The medicine used was also unheard of and was very precious. Some of the small wounds on the child's face had already healed. Elder sister is a good person, Ren Hongfei said softly. His father glared at him. What nonsense are you saying? That's Her Highness the Crown Princess. How can you casually claim kinship? Remember this in the future. Chapter 563. After going back and forth, they didn't even have time to drink a mouthful of water, let alone have a reunion dinner. By the time they returned to the Qiao estate, it was already past lunchtime. It was already afternoon. Jojo, don't be angry. The Crown Prince hastily corrected his attitude and admitted his mistake as soon as he got on the carriage. He then gave his brother-in-law a meaningful glance. Our dear Qiao Sen was someone who knew when to yield and when not to. When he saw that his all-powerful older brother had to carefully curry favor with his older sister, he knew that he couldn't afford to offend his older sister. He hastily reached out to hug his older sister's leg and wailed, "Older sister, I was wrong. Older sister, please forgive me." He had always maintained the image of an obedient and clever child in front of his family's elders. Wei Ziqin and the others were completely unaware of his nickname as the capital's little tyrant. When this little fellow first arrived in the capital, he wasn't that daring. It was mainly after experiencing a few incidents that he realized his older brother was especially capable and powerful, so he started to become increasingly fearless. As long as he suffered any grievances, he just had to cry in front of his older brother, and the matter would immediately be resolved. At first, there were still people who dared to bully him in the academy, but later on, not only did they make a detour when they saw him, but they were also especially fawning over him. When they saw him, they would call him Little Young Master Qiao and were extremely respectful. He would go to his older brother for anything he wanted. If he got into any trouble, he would also go to his older brother. His older brother would run over to his house every 2 to 3 days, and he would bring a lot of gifts every time he came back. He basically allowed the little fellow to take whatever he wanted. In addition, he was the only male grandchild in the entire old Qiao family, so old Madam doted on him a lot. Sometimes, when Wei Ziqin wanted to scold him, old Madam would protect him. This child's one sentence had the effect of hundreds of people responding to his call. Qiao Sen was young and lived an arrogant and luxurious life. How could his little tail not fly to the sky? Now, he finally knew how terrifying his older sister was. If he offended his older sister, even his older brother couldn't protect him. Thus, this older sister was very powerful. He was young, but he knew how to read people's expressions. When he saw that his older sister's expression had softened, he cried even harder and begged for mercy. Arbor didn't want to beat him up. She just recalled her previous life. She had a good younger brother who was raised crooked by Wen Rowan and became a hedonistic debauchee. He would fight with others in the brothel all day long and was beaten to death at the age of 16. Thinking of this, she turned her little head away and looked out the window with reddened eyes, not saying a word. The Crown Prince's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly reached out and hugged the little one. His heart was filled with regret and sadness. "I'm sorry, Jojo. I swear, I won't spoil him anymore. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. It's all because I've always been obedient to him. That's why he's acting so lawlessly. Don't be angry with yourself. Just hit me." The Crown Prince took her small hand and patted his chest. "Hit me hard." Xiao Mu turned her head to glare at him. This really was a peerlessly good brother. Little did she know that the Crown Prince was also tricked by his brother-in-law. His brother-in-law was usually well-mannered and well-behaved in front of him. He didn't live in the Qiao estate and would usually come and go in a hurry. He would visit his parents-in-law and leave a gift before leaving. He was only a 7 or 8-year-old child. How could he know that this kid was so crafty and usually put on an act? When Mou, that brat, was young, the Crown Prince also allowed his younger brother to do whatever he wanted and gave him whatever he wanted. This brother-in-law was no different from his own younger brother, so who would have thought that his brother-in-law would be so tricked? 10:00 in the morning. Chapter 564. The carriage turned back to Minshan Avenue and slowly moved along the bluestone-paved street. In the carriage, Xiao Xin sobbed for a while. His little face was flushed red, and he looked rather pitiful. Arbor looked at his red and swollen hand and pursed her lips without saying a word. After a while, when his sobbing subsided, she pulled his arm in front of her and flipped her hand to take out a small bottle of ointment. The ointment's effect of removing blood stasis and reducing swelling was naturally excellent. After applying a small piece, Xiao Sen's red and swollen hand immediately reduced by more than half. "Sister, are you still angry?" Xiao Sen peeked at his sister and said weakly. "Xiao Senator's sister beat you up. Do you blame me?" Arbor asked softly and stopped what she was doing. Xiao Sen hurriedly shook his head. This child was very clever. When he saw his big brother's gaze, which clearly said, "You dare to blame me? Brother will beat you up again immediately," this little rascal immediately cowered. "Then tell me, why did sister have to mercilessly punish you today?" Xiao Mu asked. Xiao Sen peeked at the Crown Prince, who glared at him unhappily. He hurriedly turned back and said, I shouldn't have bullied Ren Hongfei. I won't bully him in the future. That's not entirely the reason." Arbor looked at him indifferently. She put aside the ointment in her hand and said softly, "It's sister's heartache. How could my little brother be like this? Sister doesn't ask you to bring peace to the world through martial arts, but at least, the little brother in my heart can maintain a trace of kindness. Unlike the one in front of us, who bullies the weak and unreasonable. Is it fun to bully him? There are so many of you, but you beat and kicked him. Do you have any face?" Little Xiao Xin sniffled and went up to hug his sister's arm pitifully. He swore with all his might, "Sister, I won't do it again. Please don't be angry. Sister, Xiao Xin will change. I will definitely change." Big sister's snowmoon-like bright eyes revealed disappointment, which made little Xiao Xin feel very uncomfortable. "Who is that Gao Fong? He's also from the academy. His father is one of the richest merchants in the city." Arbor didn't immediately ask her brother to cut ties with Gao Fong, even though she knew that Gao Fong was one of Xiao Sen's friends in her previous life. However, considering that the child might have a negative reaction, she temporarily suppressed it and did not say anything. The reason why Xiao Sen was like this was inseparable from his family's upbringing. Fortunately, he was still young and could be taught. Therefore, Arbor did not continue to scold him. Instead, he looked out of the window thoughtfully. She did not believe that her parents would teach Xiao Sen to be such a bully. There must be a reason behind it. At this moment, the carriage had already arrived at the main entrance of the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate. Wei Ziqin was anxiously waiting at the door. She had just heard that when Jojo came back, he happened to see Xiao Sen fighting with someone. This child did not enter the house and directly took Xiao Sen to the other party's house to apologize. She didn't know what had happened and was feeling anxious. When she saw the carriage stop in front of the door, her eyes lit up. Wei Ziqin took a few steps down the stairs with excitement in her heart. She saw the curtain lift and a 14 to 15-year-old girl draped in ice sable fur came out of the carriage. Her otherworldly face, which was made of ice and snow, crashed into Wei Ziqin's eyes, causing her to be dazed for a moment. It was as if she saw Madame Wei's heart was filled with comfort. Her eyes instantly became blurry with tears. The scroll was finished. Chapter 565. With a glance, Xiao Mu saw her mother standing at the entrance, and the corners of her eyes and forehead had clearly increased with fine wrinkles. In an instant, Arbor's heart was filled with longing. She quickly walked towards her mother, walking faster and faster until she was sprinting. Wei Ziqin also hurriedly ran down the steps. She shook off the hand of a servant girl who wanted to support her and ran towards her daughter with open arms. "Mother!" Arbor rushed over and was immediately pulled into Wei Ziqin's arms. Wei Ziqin reached out and patted her on the back. With tears in her eyes, she scolded, "You stinky child. Tell me, what did you tell mother when you left? You said that you'd be back in 3 years if you were fast. What about now? How many years has it been? How many years have you not been back? You haven't even written a letter in 2 to 3 years. You're deliberately making mother worried to death. You child." "I'm sorry, mother." Arbor raised her head with red eyes. She acted coquettishly in her mother's arms and said pitifully, "Something happened and daughter couldn't make it back in time. Look, you're going to be a girl of marriageable age soon, but you're still acting coquettishly in mother's arms." Wei Ziqin smiled through her tears and reached out to poke the little girl's forehead. When she looked up at Mo Lian, who was quickly following behind, her face was filled with embarrassment. "Little Mo, I've made a fool of myself in front of you." "How could that be, Auntie? Let's talk inside." Okay. Jojo's father and second uncle still don't know that Jojo is back. Come, let's go inside first." Wei Ziqin held her daughter's hand and looked at Prince Mo with regret. Crown Prince Mo found his mother-in-law's regretful gaze very strange no matter how he looked at it. What a pity. Wei Ziqin sighed in her heart. She didn't know what was wrong with the great king of the Mo kingdom. Why did he suddenly decree a marriage for his daughter? Otherwise, she would have thought highly of Xiaomo. Xiaomo was a mature and steady child with a good temper. Most importantly, he was filial. It was hard to find such a good boy. Although he was a few years younger than their daughter, he was older and could dote on her. Besides, the two of them were a match made in heaven and could be considered childhood sweethearts. The couple knew Xiaomo well, so they could rest assured leaving their daughter in his care. It was a match made in heaven. But now, sigh. Although her daughter was about to be of marriageable age, in Wei Ziqin's eyes, she was still too young. The palace was also a place full of trouble, so how could she bear to harm her own daughter? However, the king's orders could not be disobeyed. Ever since that strange imperial edict was issued, Wei Ziqin had not eaten much for lunch. Her heart was filled with anxiety. Arbor snuck a glance at the crown prince, then turned and waved at Xiao Sen, who was alighting from the carriage. Xiao Sen skipped forward in small steps, his head shrinking back slightly. When Wei Ziqin saw this naughty and mischievous youngest son, her face turned stern. "Xiao Sen, what were you doing at the door just now? Why did you anger your eldest sister the moment she returned?" Xiao Sen immediately hugged his mother's thigh. "Mother, elder sister has already forgiven Xiao Senior. Little young master, what happened to your hand?" A servant girl with a delicate face and a tall figure quickly walked out from Wei Ziqin's side. She bent down and picked up Xiao Sen's small hand, softly saying a sentence. Wei Ziqin's gaze landed on her youngest son's hand. Although most of the swelling on Xiao Sen's hand had disappeared, it was still a little red. It just didn't look as frightening as before. Chapter 566. Wei Ziqin frowned. "Donghe, why aren't you greeting eldest miss? You're so unruly." Only then did the maidservant named Donghe put down Xiao Sen's hand in terror. She turned around and gave Arbor a salute. "Donghe greets eldest Mississippi." Arbor swept a glance at her before turning to look at her mother. Wei Ziqin smiled. You haven't returned for many years, and you don't know that there are many new people in the family. Let's go in first. Little young master, does your hand still hurt? Donghe followed behind and asked softly. Little young master must be tired. This servant will carry you in. Little Chao Sen was just about to lie down on Donghe like in the past. Only to see her eldest sister abruptly turn her head, her clear and cold eyes abruptly glared at that servant girl. Let go. This furious shout immediately gave Donghe, as well as the two manservants guarding the door, a huge fright. Donghe seemed to have been bitten by a venomous snake as she hurriedly retracted her hands. Can't you walk by yourself? Arbor was impatient with this kind of young master and young misbehavior. She looked coldly at the maidservant named Donghe. How old are you already? What kind of person are you to hang out with all these dubious people all day long? The eyes of the dubious maidservant Donghe immediately reddened from grievance. She gritted her teeth and lowered her head, concealing the unwillingness in her eyes. Walk properly. How many times has mother told you that you should be scolded by your eldest sister if you don't have proper manners? Wei Ziqin patted her son in annoyance and pulled him into the house. Little Chao Sen obediently stepped into the house by himself. Steward Chang Zai, who came after hearing the news, greeted eldest miss with a face full of smiles and then followed along. Seeing many unfamiliar faces along the way, Arbor couldn't help but frown. Mother, why are there so many idle people in the house? Idle people. The corner of Chang Zai's mouth twitched. Sure enough, little master didn't like those extra servants. Wei Ziqin looked at her daughter in amusement. The mother and daughter pair held hands and walked affectionately toward the main hall. Actually, it's not that many people. Your grandmother likes the house to be more lively, so she bought more than 10 servant girls. Your grandmother left 2 servant girls to accompany her and chat with her. All in all, our Chao family has a total of 21 people. Compared to the rules of a normal manor, there are far fewer manservants and maids. Wei Ziqin said to her daughter in a kind manner. Arbor turned his head and glared at the crown prince unhappily. It must be this fellow who sent this and that every 2 to 3 days, making the family very rich. Otherwise, how could father and second uncle go out to do missions from time to time to support such a large number of people? Speaking of which, these idlers were mostly supported by the crown prince. Prince stepped forward innocently and hooked Arbor's little finger. Jojo. Auntie was right. There weren't many new servants in the house. Now that the courtyard is so big, it's troublesome to take care of it. You don't want Auntie to work too hard, right? Arbor snorted and turned his head away, not wanting to pay attention to him. Wei Ziqin, on the other hand, was somewhat alarmed. She hurriedly stepped forward to separate the two people's hands, looking at her daughter with a face that wanted to say something but hesitated. Chow, mother has something to tell you. Crown Prince was baffled. He didn't understand why his mother-in-law had stepped forward to break up an affectionate couple. Mother, tell me. What is it? Daughter, this morning, the family received an imperial edict. The great king somehow betrothed you to the current crown prince. Tell me about this. AI. Wei Ziqin sighed. Chapter 567. Wiping away her tears, Wei Ziqin looked at the crown prince with regret. She couldn't bear to part ways with the child she thought highly of, so she said, Little Mo, Andy knows that you like our family's chow. But this matter. Sigh, His Majesty had randomly arranged a matchmaker and had even arranged a marriage for no reason. Men and women are different, so don't get too close to our Jojo in the future. Arbor's mouth twitched. The crown prince was dumbfounded and hurriedly said, No, Auntie, that. I know. Wei Ziqin interrupted him and sighed. She took Mo Lian's hand and patted it familiarly. Acting like an elder, she said earnestly, "As subjects, it's not appropriate for us to say anything about the great king. But there aren't any outsiders here, so I'll tell you in private. This great king is too reckless. What do you think our Jojo has to do with the crown prince? Our Qiao family has always been a small family, so I can't figure it out. Where did the great king's decree come from?" The crown prince cast a pleading look at Jojo. "You should tell your mother." Xiao Mu didn't say anything and even tugged at her lips as she rolled her eyes at him that said, "Do as you see fit." She then walked forward while holding her mother's arm. "Mom, don't worry about that crown prince. Let's go see Dad and second uncle first. This child, it's fine if you talk about it at home, but don't do this when you're outside. That's the crown prince, you can't disrespect him." Wei Ziqin reminded her daughter. The crown prince felt an inexplicable sense of danger. Would his mother-in-law fly into a rage when she found out the truth and chase him out in a fit of anger? What's going on? Why am I so unlucky today? What's happening today? The group entered the main hall. His father, Qiao Zhongbang, and second uncle, Qiao Zhongxing, who had heard the news, quickly strode in. "Jojo. You're finally willing to come back from the sect." Qiao Zhongxing laughed heartily as he strode towards his niece. "Daughter." Qiao Zhongbang also hurriedly ran over with a joyful expression. "Father, second uncle." Arbor glanced at the two of them and saw that their cultivation bases had both risen slightly. Second uncle was now a level 4 peak body cultivator, while father's cultivation had reached the phenomenal success of level 7 mystic cultivation. Compared to the geniuses of the large sects, the growth of their cultivation was very slow. As time passed, it would be more difficult for them to grow. If he could find the time to refine some xian-breaking pills and body-tempering pills, they could help the two of them break through 1 or 2 levels. "Daughter, it's good that you're back. Look, you've lost a lot of weight. Your mother has been nagging me about you every day. When you come back, stay at home and let your mother nourish you well." When the crown prince heard this, he immediately had the urge to grab his wife and run away. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have sent the little fellow back so quickly. Now that he had entered the house, he couldn't go back. "Older sister." Everyone was chatting when a shout came from the door. Arbor turned around and saw Shaolin, Er's rosy little face full of smiles. Her pair of eyes were wrinkled and sparkling as she dashed through the door and threw herself at her. Arbor hurriedly reached out to catch her, her heart instantly filled to the brim. Her younger sister was no longer as pitiful and submissive as she was in her previous life. This little face in high spirits was really beautiful. "Older sister, you're finally back." Xiaolin was nearly 11 years old and no longer looked as chubby as when she was young. Now, she was a slender little girl. Chapter 568. Shaolin, you've grown a lot taller. Arbor looked at her little sister's cheerful figure and her mood was lifted. She had also temporarily thrown all those troublesome matters to the back of her mind. "Sister, you're even prettier than before." All right. These two sisters have only just met and they're already praising each other. Wei Ziqin couldn't help but giggle. She held her daughters in each hand and couldn't hide her fondness for them. "Jojo, mother will take you to see your Nanju garden. You'll live there in the future. If you don't like it, how about we change?" When the crown prince heard that, he was going to live there. The crown prince hurried forward and smiled at Wei Ziqin. "Auntie, Jojo still has to return to the palace today. There's a palace banquet tomorrow night. Auntie must know about it. When the banquet is over, it won't be too late for Jojo to move home in 2 days." The Crown Prince's words meant that he still had to wait for the banquet to be over before he could return home in 2 days. To put it bluntly, the Queen's Palace banquet had nothing to do with whether or not Arbor moved home. Even if Xiao Mu were to stay at home now, she would just enter the palace with her mother tomorrow night. After all, her mother was currently a marchioness with a third-rank title, so she definitely had to attend the banquet and meet the noble ladies of the capital while she was at it. Of course, the banquet wouldn't be a good one. This was inevitable. She would see who dared to provoke her. Arbor's mother was led astray by the Crown Prince's words. When she thought of the palace banquet, she frowned. Jojo, I don't know what the Crown Prince's personality is like. When you enter the palace tomorrow, you'll probably have to meet him. I don't know what that great king is thinking. You haven't even reached marriageable age yet and he's already betrothed you to His Highness the Crown Prince. Although there's still some time before the wedding, the status is already set. Her mother began to nag about her daughter's boundless marriage path again, full of worry. Arbor's mouth twitched. She received the Crown Prince's pleading gaze and couldn't help but curse him inwardly. She snorted and turned her face away. The Crown Prince hurriedly stretched out his finger to scratch her small palm and gently tugged at her. Arbor coughed and reached out to hold his mother's arm and said softly, "Mother, do you remember what I told you before? There was once when your daughter was almost kidnapped by someone from an evil sect, but was saved by a young hero?" I remember. Of course, Mother remembers. Wei Ziqin's face paled at the mention of this. She still remembered that her daughter had told her that someone from the evil sect had taken a fancy to her daughter's talent and wanted to capture her to make her into a puppet. Yes. Actually, that young swordsman is the current Crown Prince. Wei Ziqin opened her mouth slightly. His Highness saved you. Okay. Arbor nodded. Wei Ziqin said gratefully, "Then Mother must properly thank His Highness the Crown Prince when I enter the palace this time." At this moment, the incompetent brother-in-law standing at the side spoke up, "Big brother, didn't Ren Hongfei's parents just call you Your Highness the Crown Prince? Why should Mother enter the palace to thank you? Can't she thank you now?" Wei Ziqin abruptly turned her head to look at the slender and elegant young man. Her pair of eyes were already wide open. Mo Lien, Xiao Zhongbang suddenly slapped his thigh. This little Mo was called so coherently that no one had thought about it. Actually, that child Mo Lien seemed to have revealed her name the moment she entered the door. Wasn't the current world surnamed Mo? First 5:00 at night. Chapter 569. Xiao Zhongbang, Wei Ziqin, and the others were just about to step forward to salute when Mo Lien hastily stopped them. "Uncle, Auntie, there are no outsiders here, so we won't pay attention to those empty formalities." What a joke. His little wife was glaring at him, so how could he dare to let Xiao Zhongbang and his wife greet him? "I didn't deliberately hide it from you before, so please forgive me." "Your Highness the Crown Prince is too serious," Xiao Zhongbang quickly said. "Uncle, Auntie, you can call me Little Mo like you always do at home. Uncle, Auntie, and second uncle are all my elders, so calling me this sounds more intimate." This. Xiao Zhongbang hesitated for a moment, but it was Wei Ziqin who readily agreed. "Little Mo, you're too much. You didn't say anything and made Auntie worry for the entire day." She thought that the great king had randomly arranged the mandarin ducks, but who knew that it was actually a misunderstanding? Arbor stood at the side without uttering a word. She could tell that the Crown Prince had been putting in a lot of effort to visit her family recently. Look at how happy he had coaxed her mother, calling him Little Mo this and Little Mo that. In the beginning, perhaps there were still some restraints due to her identity, but after chatting for a while, her mother completely recovered to her usual self. Prince Emo chatted with Arbor's mother for a while before turning to smile at Arbor. "See, I already told my future parents-in-law. There's no problem at all, right?" Arbor turned her small head and pulled Xiaolin's hand. "Xiaolin, you triggered your mystic meridians." Xiaolin nodded vigorously. "Last year, a mentor from the Mystic Cultivator Association helped me trigger my mystic meridians successfully. Sister, I'm a level 4 Mystic Cultivator now." A level 4 Mystic Cultivator who wasn't even 11 years old was already considered outstanding talent and excellent constitution. Arbor nodded in satisfaction. "Sister can tell that you worked very hard." Xiaolin's eyes revealed a smile, and she pursed her small lips. While the family was happily chatting, Donghee's silhouette flashed at the door. She then swiftly went out and hurriedly ran towards the old madam's longevity court. The old lady had just finished her afternoon nap, and Donghee happened to bump into her as she was getting up. Hearing that Donghee had rushed over, the old madam's eyes flickered slightly, and she said to the head maid beside her, "Xiaoyun, bring her in." Soon, Donghee's tall figure appeared before Wang Shi's eyes. "Donghee, you came to find me in such a hurry. Did something happen on Master's side?" Old Madam held a cup of tea and drank it unhurriedly. Her eyes swept over Donghee who was kneeling in front of her without batting an eyelid. Donghee hurriedly crawled to Old Madam on her knees and deliberately squeezed out 2 drops of tears. "Old Madam, I'm afraid you still don't know. Young Miss is back." "What?" The old lady was shocked. At the mention of Arbor, her heart was filled with a pair of icy eyes, and the hand holding the teacup froze for no reason. Donghee didn't detect Old Madam's abnormality and even added fuel to the fire as she complained, "Young Miss really is an old-fashioned and strict person." As soon as she entered the house, she beat up little young master without any explanation. Little young master is only so old. What does a 7 or 8-year-old know? Young Miss beat little young master's palm until it was red and swollen. It really makes one's heart ache. Madam actually didn't say anything and just let young Miss do as she pleased. This servant really can't stand it anymore. Moreover, Old Madam, young Miss has been back for so long, but she actually didn't come over to pay respects to you. She's seriously too unfilial. Donghee pursed her lips. Chapter 570. Just now, this servant saw that little young master was beaten so pitifully, so this servant wanted to carry little young master away to apply some ointment. Who knew that eldest miss would berate this servant without any explanation and even say that this servant is that kind of indecent person? Donghee continued to complain with an aggrieved expression, "Old Madam, in any case, this servant is someone that you assigned to Master and Madam." Eldest miss not giving this servant any face clearly shows that she doesn't put Old Madam in her eyes. With every sentence that Donghee said, Wang Nei's expression turned worse by a few degrees. Finally, she slammed the table and shouted angrily, "This little girl's temper has grown increasingly these few years. This old one wants to meet her. Look at how good my good granddaughter is now to be able to do something like beating her own younger brother the moment she entered the house, causing the entire family to be in a state of chaos." Having achieved her goal, Donghee secretly revealed a sinister smile. She hurriedly wiped away her tears and stood up, following Old Madam with small steps. Xiaoyun frowned and caught up with Old Madam's footsteps. She whispered, "Old Madam, you're going to the antechamber by yourself. Then why are you looking for eldest miss? Don't forget, eldest miss's current status is completely different. Early this morning, His Majesty issued a marriage decree and has already betrothed her to His Highness the Crown Prince. Eldest miss is now Her Highness the Crown Princess. There's a difference between a monarch and a subject. If you rashly rush over to reprimand her like this and someone with ulterior motives finds out, they will definitely make a big fuss about it. Thinking carefully, old madam almost broke out in a cold sweat. She turned to look at Xiaoyun and nodded repeatedly. Xiaoyun's words are very true. Seeing that old madam was actually about to back down, how could Dongha be willing to comply? She hurriedly added fuel to the fire and said, "Old madam, even if eldest miss is now Her Highness the Crown Princess, the current great king is also someone who pays attention to filial piety. Could she disrespect her grandmother just because she was the crown prince consort?" This servant heard that when the Empress Dowager was ill, His Highness the Crown Prince had also attended to the Empress Dowager for several days. As the Crown Prince's official wife, the Crown Princess is a role model for the entire world. The word filial piety is enough to firmly suppress her. "Dongha, why are you stirring up trouble here? What intentions did he have? Could it be that you want to see the old madam and the Crown Princess at odds?" She had long known that this Dong he wasn't a good person. Although she was quick-witted, she was too scheming. If Xiaoyun knew that Dongha was here today to pick a fight with the Crown Princess, Xiaoyun would really regret not blocking her at the door and directly chasing her out. As servants, all they had to do was to be tactful. How could there be so much trouble? This Dongha was probably reprimanded by the Crown Princess and couldn't hold back her anger, so she ran over to challenge the old madam to stand up for her. However, the old madam was already so old. Recently, she had become more and more powerless. In fact, the right way to go was to enjoy her old age safely. Why would she bother arguing with a junior when she had nothing to do? "Sister Xiaoyun, what are you saying?" "All right, help this old woman over to take a look." Dong He's words were somewhat reasonable. Even the current crown prince didn't dare to be unfilial. She didn't believe that her granddaughter would dare to be disrespectful to her. "When this servant left the antechamber just now, I heard them talking about it. It turns out that the young master who often comes to our residence to visit Madam and Master is His Highness the Crown Prince." "He's the Crown Prince?" Wang Nei was shocked. Soon after, she couldn't help but sigh. Such a graceful and elegant young man, this old woman felt at first glance that he was either wealthy or respectable. However, I didn't expect that his status would be so high. Chapter 571. When elderly lady was helped into the room, everyone was happily chatting. As soon as elderly lady Wang entered, the entire living room was dead silent. Everyone stood up to welcome elderly lady Wang and stole glances at each other. Seeing that elderly lady Wang didn't come with good intentions, they couldn't help exchanging glances. On the other hand, Arbor didn't say anything. When her mother stood up, she also stood up and bowed to elderly lady Wang with her mother before sitting down. No one could find fault with this etiquette. However, elderly lady Wang was furious and disliked the little stoic no matter how she looked at her. She had a stoic expression on her face all day, and it was the same for 7 to 8 years. It was as if someone owed her a huge debt. "Xiao Sen, come to grandmother." After elderly lady Wang sat down, she beckoned to Xiao. Senator Xiao Sen bounced over, and elderly lady Wang pulled up his small hand. When elderly lady Wang saw that her grandson's hand was indeed still red and swollen, her expression changed abruptly, and she turned to berate Arbor. "Eldest lass, so what if you're back? Is there a need to cause such a big commotion? This is your biological younger brother, not someone picked up from the streets. Look at you, you dragged him to someone else's house to torment him as soon as you came back, beating and scolding him. This old one and your parents aren't dead yet. It's not your turn to meddle in your younger brother's upbringing." Arbor's icy gaze shot straight at elderly lady Wang. The sharp glint in her gaze immediately frightened elderly lady Wang so much that her heart skipped a beat. Elderly lady Wang hadn't seen this lass for several years, but she didn't expect her gaze to be even sharper now. This gaze was practically able to cut open her old bones. However, elderly Lady Wang currently valued this little grandson and couldn't bear to see him suffer any grievances. Even if she was a bit cowardly, she still couldn't resist standing up for her grandson. Donghe stood next to elderly Lady Wang and pursed her lips as she secretly snickered, waiting to see eldest Miss suffer. All of a sudden, eldest Miss stood up abruptly, and a pair of icy eyes abruptly shifted to her. The front hall was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Donghe felt that her heart was about to leap out of her chest. In a flash, eldest young Miss had already arrived in front of her. Without any explanation, a heavy slap landed on her cheek. This slap was truly beautiful. Donghe immediately opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood that was mixed with 2 teeth. She fell to the ground with a plop and started whimpering. Her pupils constricted and were filled with disbelief and terror. The old lady was so frightened by the servant girl's actions that her face drained of color. She thought that the servant girl had rushed up to hit her, but it turned out that the servant girl next to her had attacked her. She suddenly remembered that a few years ago, she had called upon the 2 grandnephews of the Wang family to fight with her. At that time, her granddaughter was only 7 years old. At that time, she had not been able to gain any advantage from her hands. Ever since she was 7 years old, this girl had always been fierce and no one dared to bully her. "Old madam, is this what you taught? A little servant girl also dares to turn her nose up at me. What kind of thing is she?" Arbor berated, scolding mercilessly. A servant girl, dressing herself up like a concubine, wearing red and green and acting coy all day long and showing off her right and wrong. She doesn't have the slightest bit of a servant girl's duty, causing the entire household to be in a foul atmosphere. Hurry and come. Immediately drag her away. Even if you want to sell her or beat her to death, make her disappear from my sight immediately. Don't disgust me. Chang Sai immediately jumped out tactfully. With a wave of his hand, he instructed 2 manservants to go up and twist Donghe's arm. Chapter 572. Old Madam was so infuriated that her chest heaved up and down repeatedly. She pointed at Arbor and said, "You," for a long time, but she couldn't utter a complete sentence. Her eyes were so furious that they were about to spit out flames. "What right do you have to sell me? What right do you have to sell me? I'm old madam's person." Donghe's arms were twisted by the 2 manservants, and her eyes couldn't help but widen as she struggled non-stop. Her head of jewelry and jade shook, and her disheveled appearance cut a sorry figure. Arbor's belly full of anger instantly exploded, and he fiercely kicked that last Donghe, sending her flying out from the 2 manservants' hands. She fell to the ground fiercely, and her head knocked against the thick stone slab, instantly creating a bloody hole. The surroundings were dead silent. All the servants stared at the enraged eldest miss with fear and trepidation. They only felt as if their hearts were gripped by a giant palm, and they were so frightened that they were somewhat unable to breathe. "What right do I have to sell you?" Arbor shouted sternly, then turned to Steward Chang Zai and roared, "Go and bring her indenture contract here. Immediately." "Yes, yes, yes." Chang Zai hurriedly signaled to the manservants with his eyes. The group of people swiftly rushed to Longevity Court. Since she said she was old madam's person, then the indenture contract must be in Longevity Court. Old Madam looked on helplessly as that group of manservants accepted Arbor's order without any moral integrity and openly ran to her court to search for the indenture contract. She was so angry that her chest kept panting, and she was almost unable to breathe. Not a moment later, a few quick-witted manservants dug out the indenture contract, and a thin stack was handed over to eldest Mississippi. "Do you see this? Your indenture contract is now in my hands. If I want you to live, you'll live. If I want you to die, you'll die for me." Arbor waved the slave contract in his hand, scaring Dongha, who was curled up on the ground, to the point that she scrambled to the old lady's side and cried, "Old lady, save me, old lady, save me." That was a weeping pear blossom bathed in the rain, her coquettish eyes brimming with charm. That last Dongha's entire body was trembling. Seeing that old madam was panting heavily without making a sound, she looked up in Qiao Zhongbang's direction and crawled towards him while crying. "Master, master, save me." He knew that the old lady was up to no good again. This Dong He, judging from her enchanting appearance, was definitely someone who wasn't content with her marriage. Most likely, the matriarch had even promised her that if she found an opportunity, she might even promote her to be her father's bedwarmer. Xiao Sen was ruined by you demons. Arbor stepped forward and stomped on Dong He's back, directly making her lie there and unable to move. Drag her out, flog her 30 times, and immediately sell her. From now on, this will be the outcome of whoever dares to talk nonsense again. Arbor said coldly as he ruthlessly stomped on Dong He's back with his small foot. Dong He howled as she was dragged out. She never expected that she would become a part of the play when she only came to watch the show. Old madam was so angry that she sat paralyzed on the ground. She pounded the ground and wailed, "My descendants are unworthy. My descendants are unworthy. Ah, I'm already so old, but I'm being humiliated by my granddaughter like this. I can't live anymore. I can't live anymore." As he spoke, he patted his chest and gasped for breath. Qiao Zhongbang awkwardly glanced at the crown prince, who was sitting calmly on the side. A pitch-black shadow had appeared at the crown prince's side at some point in time, and Hui Feng followed him like a shadow. The crown prince secretly sent him a look, and Hui Feng understood and left after receiving the order. Chapter 573. This was truly a farce. His mother had only stopped for a short while, so why did she start making a fuss again as soon as eldest miss returned? She clearly knew that his eldest miss wasn't someone who was easy to bully. This old lady. Qiao Zhongbang couldn't help but rub his aching head, secretly blaming his mother for being so meddlesome. He had already investigated the matter of his younger son being beaten. It was indeed due to his parents' negligence in disciplining him that he deserved to be beaten and punished. He had originally intended to personally make a trip to Sir Ren's residence tomorrow to apologize to him. What the hell is this old lady doing? She rushed over to rebuke his eldest miss just because a servant girl made a fuss in front of her. This was truly vexing. If it weren't for someone instigating them, no one would have thought of informing old madam today. Why would she come over on her own? Qiao Zhongbang wasn't a fool and connected the dots after thinking carefully. Wasn't this purely for His Highness the Crown Prince to see a joke with such a ruckus at home? Qiao Zhongbang sneaked a glance at the Crown Prince. Seeing that the Crown Prince had a calm expression and didn't say much, he couldn't help but relax slightly. After Hui Feng left to carry out his orders, the Crown Prince sneered inwardly. That servant girl called Dong something was extremely audacious and actually angered his darling Qiao so much that her face flushed red. As such, she still wanted to smoothly report to the broker house after leaving the Qiao estate. Dong he didn't know that her fate was already sealed. After being punished with 30 whips, she was thrown at the door like a rag, waiting for the broker house's people to come and take her away. She was full of resentment and indignation as she cursed, so what if the Qiao estate's eldest miss is great? So what if the crown princess is great? One day, I will avenge today's grievances. Just you wait. MMPH. The two servants disliked her and directly stuffed her mouth with a rag. Mother, please get up first. Wei Ziqin sat still with a cold expression, but Qiao Zhongbang couldn't sit still anymore. He couldn't possibly watch his mother sit on the ground like a village woman and make a scene in front of the crown prince. You unfilial son. The old lady slapped Xiao Zhongbang in the face. A few years ago, Xiao Zhongbang's sincere heart was almost obliterated by Laonyang. Now, his heart had long since cooled down, so naturally, it would not hurt anymore. On the other hand, second uncle Xiao Zhongxing was enraged. He stood up with a whoosh and said angrily, Mother. What are you doing? Have you had enough? You guys, why aren't you helping old madam back to longevity court? Ah, the son is unfilial and the daughter-in-law is unvirtuous. Ah, his descendants are unworthy. What's the point of me living? Just let me die. The old lady howled, wailing to the heavens. Xiao Zhongbang got up quietly and ignored her. Arbor coldly glanced at the old lady. Suddenly, he flipped his hand and took out a small bottle of liquid medicine from his inner world. He slowly walked over to the old lady and handed it over. Here, drink it. The old lady's eyes widened as she looked at him. Her lips involuntarily trembled. What is this? Poison. Drink a mouthful, and I guarantee that you'll die thoroughly. The old lady's face drained of color as she raised her head. Everyone in the courtyard was even more silent. They pursed their lips and didn't make a sound. The entire front hall was filled with a terrifying silence. Do you need me to find someone to wait on you? Arbor asked coldly. You. The old lady was also a coward. When Arbor was fierce to her, she became somewhat listless. Looking into Arbor's emotionless eyes, her entire body couldn't help but tremble. Today, it ended at 10 p.m. Next week, 6 p.m. Chapter 574. Elderly lady stared blankly for a moment, then she started to throw a tantrum, rolling on the floor, and bawling loudly. The son is unfilial, and the daughter-in-law is unvirtuous. Ah. You're going to drive this old woman to death. Ah. Arbor looked on coldly from the sidelines, not saying a word. Her beautiful eyes were filled with ridicule as she stared at elderly lady. However, right at this moment, a manservant guarding the door rushed in and bowed. Master, madam, second master. There's a group of people at the door, claiming to be third master's family, and they insist on barging in. We don't know their identities, so we've been temporarily blocked outside. When elderly lady heard the words, third master, it was as if her ears had been pricked. She instantly stopped throwing tantrums and raised her head to shriek, It's Zhongheng, Zhongheng's family is here. I want to see them. Zhongheng, my poor child. You're here to save your old mother. Wei Ziqin stood up and pulled the two children to the side, not bothering to pay attention to this wailing old woman. She was about to be annoyed to death by this old woman. She would bring Xiao Xin to her side every 2 to 3 days to raise him, but she didn't raise him well and spoiled him until he was full of bad habits. Every time she wanted to teach her son a lesson, this old woman would hurriedly protect him, not allowing her to hit or scold him. Look at what kind of child they've raised. If it weren't for her eldest daughter making such a scene today, she wouldn't have known that this little rascal actually bullied others outside. He deserved a beating. When she returned, she would have his father fiercely scold him. She had to make this child remember this lesson. At this moment, Wei Ziqin saw that elderly lady was throwing a tantrum, so she hurriedly handed the 2 half-grown children to the old mama beside her. Nanny Li, take the 2 young ladies and young master back to their rooms first. This place was truly too noisy. She didn't want her children to see this old woman's tantrum and learn from her in the future. Yes. Mother. Xiao Lin still wanted to stay and watch the show, but her mother glared at her. Go back. Young ladies could learn anything, but learning how to throw tantrums and roll on the ground like this old woman was truly too uncultured. Oh. Xiao Lin pouted. Nanny Li held her hand and dragged Xiao Xin away. The two children were taken away. At this moment, the two servants at the entrance were beaten up and forced their way in. Although Qiao Zhongheng was thin and weak, the muscles on his arms were bulging. It was obvious that he was a strength-type superhuman. Relying on his own strength, he rushed through the door at lightning speed and took the lead to barge into the Marquis' manor. Behind him, his wife and children, as well as Granny Nyo's family, followed. With the help of Granny Nyo's strong and healthy sons, Qiao Zhongheng and his entourage swept away 1,000 troops along the way, beating up all the manservants of the Qiao estate until they were looking for their teeth on the ground. The group of people dashed straight to the antechamber and stared at the large Marquis' mansion, as well as Qiao Zhongbang's family's bright and beautiful appearance. Their eyes were red with jealousy. Heavens, what kind of life did they have on this journey? What kind of life did the first branch of the Qiao family have? Qiao Zhongheng never expected that his honest and wooden eldest brother, who was the most disliked by his mother, would actually achieve meteoric success today and be conferred the title of Marquis by the great king. Su Jiao's eyes were sharp, and she spotted Granny Nei Wang, who was lying on the ground. Wailing to the heavens and wailing, she rushed forward and hugged her mother, bawling her eyes out. Mother! My dear mother! This daughter-in-law has finally found you. Mother, mother, mother. Elderly lady almost fainted from Su Jiao's wailing. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.